Hello, wherever you are, and welcome to a very special live discussion, dialogue with a Muslim guest who I was very eager to have come on the channel. His name is Al, and he actually called into a live stream I did a couple weeks ago that was about the Salman Rushdie attack. We discussed a lot of things. We had a lot of disagreements. We had a lot of things that I think we saw common ground on as well. And I thought it'd be very interesting to just have like a separate conversation with him. And I'm so glad that he accepted the invitation. And yeah, I'm ready to get started if you are, Al.
Cool, yeah.
You can just introduce yourself to everyone in whichever way you want to do
Oh,
so.
cool, yeah. So, yeah, it's Al, a conservative Muslim. You may disagree with what I say. That's okay. You don't have to agree with me, but hopefully you have a good, fruitful conversation. And if you have any questions, I'll try to answer. But if the like, if I have to, if I have to like look externally for the questions and I can't answer them in the context, then I probably will skip. But let's just cross that bridge when we get there. And hopefully, it
Oh,
should all
sure.
be good.
Yeah. That totally works for me. And as we discussed beforehand, what I'm really looking to just discuss with you, Al, is just your own personal experiences, your own personal thoughts. If there's anything that you feel like you can't comment on, then don't feel any pressure to do so. So yeah, I'm hoping that this kind of conversation is something that I see happen more in the world between ex-Muslims and Muslims, where we're coming from a place of trying to get to a common shared understanding and trying to learn from each other instead of it being that kind of clickbaity adversarial stuff of ex-Muslim destroys Muslim or Muslim destroys ex-Muslim, or versus like this person versus that person. I don't think that's very productive, although it does drive traffic. In the spirit of that, I wanted to do this. And for all of you watching, if you look in the live chat, I did leave a poll question on whether or not you would be interested in seeing me do more of these kinds of dialogues with Muslims. Let me know what you think, yes or no question. Maybe you can hold off on voting until the very end. But yeah, with that out of the way, Al, so I think a good place to start would be to kind of just get a sense
Okay.
of just you personally, of like how you came to the Muslim faith.
It's complicated because I was born Muslim. I didn't feel like I was Muslim. Um, I can tell you my whole story, but because it's hard to give a definitive answer. It may take about 5-10 minutes, but I can tell you about my whole experiences if that's okay.
Yeah. Take your
So,
time.
so in terms of myself, I was raised. In terms of myself, I was raised as in a conservative Muslim household. I did grow up around a vibrant Muslim community, and all of my peers up to a certain point were Muslim, and it was just a Muslim experience overall. Growing up, I just felt so culturally Muslim, more so than actually Muslim, in a sense that I had no spiritual connection to Islam. However, I would lose my absolute shit if I was offered pork, and I'd also travel for a lot of protests and support for Muslim causes. But then I wouldn't really do things I would have to as a Muslim. And at the time, like a part of me became apathetic. It was an emotional time for me back then, as a Muslim, as it felt like it was the end of days. Because like Iraq was like ruined. There was perpetual war in Afghanistan, Palestine. There was a lot of like flotilla raids and a lot of people getting killed. Furthermore, Libya was ruined, and you see Gaddafi on a truck just being paraded around after being bayoneted in the anus, and it was just a very very tough time as a Muslim, and so I became a bit apathetic. When college came around, I started hanging around less with my Muslim friends, and spent more time with non-Muslim friends. And bit by bit, Islam slowly weaned out of my life. I continued this downward trajectory of hedonism for years, but still identifying as a Muslim, if you know what I mean. So there was a point in life where I didn't really have any Muslim friends, and this really affected me. So, because I didn't really have any echo chamber, I'd always been an inquisitive person, and I always tried to put Islam on the same kind of like l- level as atheism, Hinduism, or as an equally like valid theology. So this led me to making new friends, bonding over a mutual love of Super Smash Bros. And games and other vices that would get me in a altered state. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And so my new friends were atheists, and we never really talked about theology, but a conversation made me recalibrate and think things through. So when I spoke of the Abrahamic religion and Islam, he said it was very convenient as a religion, just the whole narrative. And internally I agreed, but then I thought laterally and thought about myself as a Muslim, how it's very, very convenient that I was Muslim. Would I still be Muslim if I was in Tibet or anywhere else in the world? Would I follow that religion? And it's also convenient. So this idea, what started the doubts, however, it led to me to think, me being Muslim. Sorry, I'm trying to recalibrate. So I didn't renounce my faith at that time. I didn't but gradually over time I started to not think like a Muslim, not live like a Muslim at all. And it came to a point where I was asking myself, like, why was I stopping myself from doing X action if it makes no difference at all? So at the time I thought, in the grand scheme of things, the vices I commit on this floating rock, which in relative terms is the size of an atom, should make no difference at all. It probably isn't even measurable if I do this specific act in the middle of nowhere on this grain of whatever we are on. So I continued on this route, still hung out with my friends, but it came to a point where my family caught on when I was doing things I wasn't supposed to do in a certain month. I admit I thought it was unnecessary to my family to go through these motions and rituals. My family response was, at first, it wasn't hostile, but it was more of a bargaining type. And my response was more of like, how could we be so sure? And you just do your own thing, I'll do my own thing. I never really showed my hand fully, but it was more like a thing, just more of a let me do my own thing kind of thing, but not really saying verbally anything. But I was on Muslim subreddits as a lurker and read their arguments. However, it did feel a bit trollish in nature, vindictive, bit personal attacks on their own parents, and overall toxicity. It felt like a cesspit, to be quite honest, and it was mostly people venting about their own experiences as a Muslim. There was not much arguments. Furthermore, I carried on life, forgetting about everything apart from work and personal life, as realistically, we don't really stop to think at all. It just happens over a period of time, until one night I was thinking based on an article I seen document Pakistan and India friction of sorts. And then I wondered, if Pakistan and India were the only countries in the world, like, would India be by default right? And as their as this view sorry as the view would be the consensus, would be the right opinion, and that's how we deem what is acceptable and what isn't, what the consensus deems is acceptable. So then I thought about so then I thought more about morals, where and how they were meaningless, and it's just a label, just to categorize in what we describe as I don't know. Yeah, I don't have. Sorry, pause. Let's move on. So at that time, it's hard to go back about 10 years, for 5 years, 10 for 10 years, and try to like capture my rugged, rough thoughts. But at the time, it was just like, I thought, um, morals is just a label. It's nothing more than a label. And I asked myself more ethical questions, and I was struggling to find an equilibrium of sorts. I understood this could be moral gray area. There could be moral gray area. For instance, a person stealing to feed a child. However, able to. I wasn't able to say certain things aren't objectively wrong. So, for instance, rape and stealing, as even down like to the single cell, or even animals, it seems to be in our primordial instinct nature to reproduce and dominate with our genes. And in terms of stealing, if I steal, I disadvantage my rival and benefit myself in a social Darwinistic train of thought. This will be good because but in my head, I knew what I was saying was just BS, as rape and stealing don't feel intrinsically right. But I was struggling to make sense of it. So the idea of Islam Muhammad, peace be upon him, came up. I never really had strong feelings for Islam, for or against, as I I don't feel I ever was Muslim. And when I left, when I did internalize me leaving Islam, I lived how I did prior. It didn't make much change. I wasn't really practicing, so like I I didn't um, I didn't have strong opinions as most ex-Muslims do over the internet. So I didn't feel the need to just do blasphemy acts. But then also I read up about how va- what I knew of before vaguely. So like of Aisha's marriage and him killing Jews and whatever else I read at that time. And I asked myself, would it be objectively bad? And whatever categorization I give to those actions, would it mean anything? Or is it just noise that sounds like words? I then started to think about how meaningless things were. And to be honest, to be really honest, I just shut myself from even thinking about this sort of stuff for a couple of weeks as the realization of what is described as nihilism is depressing. And I would just double down on my vices that I was committing to in that time. I then started to think about theism and why in the modern world people choose cling to religion and why there are so many theists in this age. And I thought humans were tribalistic in nature, so that's why people assign themselves on teams, even if they don't have a religion, they feel a strong connect to a cultural identity, which could be religion. So that's why I rationalize why people theism was strong. But I started to think about my ancestors and then where I came from. It fascinated me that I'm on a continuation of cells, so to speak. I'm the result of my ancestor being survivalistic, winning a duel, perhaps, not starving himself to death. Me just being in time for one of my ancestors to breed with me. So I then thought about the Earth. So I went from my ancestors, and then I thought about the Earth, and then the galaxy, and then the universe, and then it all had to have a starting point. And I did speak to my friends about it, and they replied, "Why does the universe need to be created?" And that it can just exist. And the conversation also led to the multiverse, which is a bit interesting. So, but I wasn't convinced, so to speak. And the way they spoke, it reminded me of Muslims and Christians who were dismissive of the other quote unquote team. So my thoughts weren't as refined as they were now. However, I was felt confused as an atheist and felt more turmoil in this state than I did prior. So but at that point, I couldn't say there was no God. The self evidence suggested otherwise. However, there was the issue of God and would he be indifferent and as sentient as a rock? I didn't think so. And do I have to join a team, quote unquote, to believe in a God? I did have a look at the major religions in the world, and I did see Christianity as plainly false. So, as its basis is conjecture, and it is a hard sell to believe Jesus is God, as you can't be powerful and not powerful at the same time. And I found it a bit disturbing that the death of Jesus gave me a free pass to do anything I want. Uh, but I also took a look at Judaism and saw the merit of it. So it makes sense if there is a God, he would be formless. However, again, the Old Testament could be classified as conjecture and the religion was very isolationist. It confused me that Judaism didn't spread, and the creator of the universe would like for the truth to be condensed to less than 1% of the population of the whole world. I did took a look, I did take a look at other religions. I looked at Hinduism, and to be honest, there's so many problems with Hinduism that I don't think it merits an explanation. The last religion was Islam, and it had one God, which I believed was rational. It was formless, which made sense. Furthermore, it wasn't based off conjecture, and ideas logically followed. I did think it was convenient. At that time, I did think it was convenient, and maybe I had biases due to my cultural background that maybe I am attached to this. So I did check online for arguments against Islam, and I thought there'd be something just to challenge my own biases, and I couldn't find anything that would stick against Islam. It was either Christians saying Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a false prophet who spoke with demons, which didn't make sense and was grounded in speculation, or atheists making moral claims, or saying they can't seem to reconcile a certain idea. But those reasons didn't entail Islam being false or God not existing. So I struggled with that as well. So it just seems people don't. It just seems that atheists at that time didn't aesthetically agree with Islam and just disapproved of its teaching. So to conclude, why at that time, sorry, why I believe Islam is the truth and why I'm a Muslim now is because I couldn't call Islam a non sequitur as it logically follows. Furthermore, as it isn't false, I have to call it true. It hasn't been proven false, so I have to deduce that it has been true. And to be quite honest, at that point in time, it didn't. When I did realize, when I did come to terms with Islam, I didn't really didn't do my shahada straight away. I did tell myself basically, I'm gonna get straight, I'm gonna stop sinning, and then I'm gonna become Muslim. This happened for over 6 months, but then I just realized I will never become Muslim if I have this attitude. So I just did my shahada and just became Muslim again. And it's not been plain sailing since. There's been a lot of challenges in terms of things I can't do anymore, which I used to do a lot. But I'm overall more happier, more content, and that's why I'm Muslim.
Thank you so much for sharing, Al. I really appreciate that, and very well said. You covered a lot of ground
Yeah,
pretty quickly. So, of course, as you can imagine, I have a lot of
yeah,
questions.
sure, sure.
Uh, just curious to learn more about a few things. Uh, I suppose the first question I wanted to ask you was like, if you don't mind sharing, like, how old are you right now?
I'm. I want to be as ambiguous as possible to not give my details, but
Wow.
27.
Okay.
I'll say I'm
All right.
27. Yeah.
Okay. So the reason I asked is because how long have you been on this journey of like taking the shahada and being a Muslim?
I'd say about 4 to 5 years. So
Four to
I
five
think
years.
that it's hard to say because I've never, I've never ever felt I was Muslim. I've never ever felt until a certain point. I've never ever felt a spiritual connection. So I don't. I was more culturally Muslim, to be quite honest. I didn't. I just felt. I don't know. It's hard to say, but officially, it. I internalized that I wasn't a Muslim about 2013, 12. And then I came back to Islam about 2018, 17.
Okay. Okay. Okay, that's really helpful just for me to kind of like just understand
Yeah.
where you were at like in different stages of your life. So one thing I was curious to know is um when you were so you called yourself an atheist at one point.
Yeah.
Um wh-
I yeah. To be honest, I wasn't. I internalized it, but I wasn't bragging about it because
yeah.
I did have, obviously I was still living at home, and I did have peers that were Muslim. I didn't vocally like speak out. I was an atheist, this and that. I was just living my own life. I didn't have time to even really think about it. I just accepted that I don't have any time for Islam. It bears no relevance in my life. I'm going to continue like it doesn't exist, basically.
Okay. So just so I can understand, so in your mind, just because you didn't follow Islam or you were indifferent to it, you automatically were an atheist? If you know what I mean? As in because you did not believe in Islam, you just
I
didn't
would
believe
do
it.
so. Yeah, I would say if you don't believe in it, if you just follow the emotions and not really doing it, I would say you are. And yeah, but I internalized in 2013. But to be honest, growing up, you never really stop to think. You just live life. We never get these moments right now, like to just sit and silence and think, where am I going? But I didn't grow. I don't know. I didn't think as a default that God was there, and it feels really awkward for me to say now, knowing it's blasphemy.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Okay. Well, tied to that, I just wanted to ask you. So you touched upon how you were pursuing hedonism
yeah,
and doing these vices. We don't
yeah,
have to get into what those
yeah, yeah,
were
yeah.
specifically, I just wanted to know what would, like, you were unhappy. You said you were unhappy during this phase in your life. Uh,
I don't. To be quite honest, I was very happy. To be quite honest, I don't want to say I enjoyed it, that aspect, but I wouldn't. For a long time, I didn't feel. I know what you're trying to get at. I
well,
chose Islam in.
would you say that, I mean, would you say something was missing, like
I
when you
know
were
what
in
you're
that
trying to
phase
get
of
at,
your
the
life?
void. It wasn't that. It was just a more. It was a question that I asked myself. So for a long time, maybe subconsciously there was. So I doubled down and maybe tried to ignore myself. I didn't actively feel depressed or anything like that. I just lived life how it did. Islam didn't bear any relevance, to be quite honest. But it came to a point where, I was just like asking myself questions, and it just it didn't logically follow. I was asking my questions. I was in turmoil, but I do understand what you're trying to get. And maybe I was low, but I think for the duration, I wasn't, so to speak. I just felt I have these shackles off me. I can do whatever I want. This is great for a long time. I don't have to uh, follow arbitrary laws.
Well, okay, how about this, Al? I'm gonna rephrase the question. Like,
Sure.
what would you say was missing in your life during that phase that you have now?
Um, Self will, self discipline, focus, purpose, conscientiousness, and overall, got peace of mind. To be honest, I don't feel like I need to make myself happy, fill myself with vices, or even feel the need to just make myself happy. I feel like when I'm low, I feel like I have to eat good food or like to go engage in vices. The past 5 years, the past a couple of years, I don't feel like I need to because I've had a focus, so to speak. Um, this extends past theology as well. I've just more focus on career. Like even right now, I'm still focused on career, move forward. But I have theology, religion, and this on my back, pushing me forward. I do feel my success comes from it, and it just comes from patience and self will. So if you're asking me what I have now, that what I am missing prior would be self will, self discipline, and I would say I would to be I do have a sense of happiness to be honest, because I'm content.
Do you well, I'm glad to hear that, first of all.
Yeah.
Um, do you think you could have gone those things without Islam? Like, as in, like, without, like, not even just Islam specifically, without religion?
Self-discipline and self-will.
Oh, well, self-discipline, self-will, and everything else you mentioned, like, like a sense of satisfaction and
Okay.
purpose.
Maybe, but it will still come to a diversion and a fork in the road where I may have to ask myself the same moral questions, which may started my journey of a turmoil. So maybe I could be like like Bill Gates, all these billionaires, and like spend a week in the middle of nowhere trying to gain focus. But it would still come to a point where I have to ask moral questions, or where I ask like where am I coming from? And some things can't overcome that. I can fast, I can do all these like mindfulness, but it won't overcome the big questions, so to speak.
Okay. Well, there's something you talked about that I thought was so interesting, because
Yeah,
when I was questioning my own Muslim
yeah,
faith, I had these same kinds of questions and struggles. And it was when you were talking about how, um,
convenience.
well, yeah, I mean, yes, but
Yeah,
specifically is just the idea you mentioned of us just being this big, or like small, meaningless rock, meaningless people doing meaningless things in this massive, big universe. And so for me personally, that was one of the things that was most upsetting about when I started questioning Islam, was this feeling of, oh, what if this is what reality is? Like, there is no meaning, and it is, like you
yeah.
said, just a rock and stuff. So I wanted to ask you just
Mm.
how did you feel about that, and like looking at the universe in that way when you were thinking those things?
I'll try to give an honest answer, but it's like you know when like you retroactively speak about your past experiences, you can be sometimes like you can frame your answers based off what how you feel presently. In terms of the questions, I have to put myself in the mind state of how I was 10 years ago,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. And in that at that point, yeah.
yeah, I'll try my best to give a representational answer. But so how did I feel knowing? To be quite honest, I just it was like the shaitan, in my opinion. It felt like the shaitan trying to convince me, no, like it doesn't matter. Like what you're doing is not even observable on some mothership on a spaceship in the world. If you're going to like commit this one vice and look at this one picture or this one video, like in the grand scheme of things, then it's I think it's more justification of me sinning, to be quite honest.
Mhm.
I didn't. It didn't feel empty. It was just like a fiend trying to tell themselves, "Oh, it's one last hit, one last hit." It was more internalization. It's more me trying to justify me doing wrong. Um, I
So
do get your
so
point.
just so I can understand you correctly, so what you're
Yeah,
saying is that you kind of looked at the universe in that way to basically give yourself the like permission to do the vices that you were doing.
because my justification at that time was this probably isn't observable. If I go to a place where I'd really, really want to, which isn't allowed in Islam. But obviously, if there is no God and if the universe is expansive, whatever I do probably isn't even observable in the whole vast universe. Because obviously,
Mhm.
Earth relative to the Milky Way and whatever, it's the size of a grain of sand, possibly less. So at that time, it was more justification of me living a hedonistic lifestyle, as anyone would do. So yeah. So that's I think that's how I felt. It was just I think was Shaitan trying to get in my ear, in my opinion.
Mhm. Okay. Well, I mean,
I
so
know you don't
here's
agree because obviously you have to look for a secular lens. I get it. I
yeah, yeah,
fully
yeah.
get it.
No, no,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand your mindset because uh the thing I'm trying to understand is why you felt the need to then go back to Islam, which is the thing that you were culturally raised into. So
Okay. Yeah.
you had these moral questions and you couldn't get satisfying answers. Why did you feel like you had to find answers to those questions?
To be quite honest, it kept me up at night. And to be quite
Okay.
honest,
Why did it keep you up at night?
so no, okay, well, yeah, because we so humans, right?
Mhm.
we are driven crazy by ambiguity, what's unknown, and the fact of this is unknown, and I couldn't pinpoint it, kept me up at night, and it felt strange that
Sorry to interrupt you, but
sure
like, what specifically is unknown?
the
Like,
morality, the fact that is it there, is it not?
okay,
It maybe really ask myself like can I rape and steal? Is that okay? Because in a Darwinistic approach, then it's not really bad at all. Because I'm spreading my seed, I'm trying to spread my seed as much as possible. I'm stealing, so I'm benefiting myself, so I have a better life. But you have to. I, I don't know. I knew at the time it was BS, but in I just felt it was intrinsically wrong. I do feel that there is objective morals at that time. My rough feelings at the time were it can't be right. Um, there has to be something that dictates what's right and wrong. We can't because obviously I this is the Darwinistic approach, but we have laws in society and it's all relative, right? But if things recede back to caveman age, then it should be okay. Sorry if my thoughts are a bit rough, but trying to go back 10 years
yeah, no, no, I
was I
understand.
yeah, it's a bit hard.
No, no, you're doing fine.
Yeah,
Well, my thing, and this is like where I would say I kind of disagree with you, is
sure.
like to me the whole question of can we just do whatever we want, especially like if you want to talk about something like rape.
Hmm.
It so I think it's more complicated than that. Like we as
Yeah,
human beings are more complicated than that because and you kind of mentioned this before because so yes, you could say just like from a basic like desire to reproduce, then going around just raping left and right will help you spread your genes.
Yeah.
more effectively, or
Yeah. Yeah.
more thoroughly, maybe. Um, but there's more layers to that. Like, can you imagine a society where people were just doing that constantly? I mean, you can see it historically that it led to issues, and uh, there's a lot of reasons why we kind of, as a society, I would say practical reasons that we as a human society decided to try not doing, if you want to specify rape, as much as it was done in the
Mm.
past. So, what I'm trying to get at is, for me, I didn't really feel that there was uh, like there had to be something external to human beings, like something objectively grounded, for
Mm.
things like rape is bad, or whatever it
Yeah. Yeah.
is bad, or this is good. To me, it always seemed like something that, well, you could kind of just see it from a human perspective, even if it's something that seems like contradictory, like being very selfless, giving away all your possessions. Well, you could
Yeah.
see the argument for that, and you could also make the argument that something that's a very selfless act could also be selfish, because the person who's doing it is doing it because they feel the need to do so, in a selfish sense, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, fair enough. So in terms of, I don't like to use the R word because obviously it's provocative, but again, it not being practical doesn't entail it being bad or good. It's subject to society. Like for instance, in Plato's Republic, I imagine rape would be bad, terrible. But in Genghis Khan's idea of humanity, he wanted to rape as much as possible. Who are we to, as an atheist, say what Genghis Khan is doing wrong? We can say it's impractical, but that's not objectively saying it's bad. And that's where the connection is, because we know intrinsically forcing yourself inside someone and raping is bad, but we have to say it's not practical as opposed to it's bad. But what
Okay,
if it is
okay.
practical?
I get the point you're making. So let's just
Sure,
park that for a second. We'll get
sure,
back
sure,
to
sure.
that, because that is an interesting point you made.
Yeah,
Uh, so just to go back like a bit, so
yeah,
so do you feel like there has to be, like there has to be God to be the source of these objective morals?
yes, I do.
Okay, so when you came to realize the truth of God and of Islam,
Mhm.
we don't have to get too far into this. I'm just trying to
Sure, sure,
understand
sure.
what it was like. What So you mentioned that Christianity was clearly false, visibly false, and
Yeah.
uh, you mentioned Hinduism and Judaism. What was it about Islam that convinced you? Like, if you were to say, what is the if you were to talk to someone who doesn't
Yeah.
know Islam, and if you had to mention one thing that convinced you that Islam is the one that has the truth, well, what would you say it is?
If I probably wouldn't. I probably wouldn't, because to be honest, I live laissez-faire. I live around non-Muslims, so I wouldn't convince them. But how I see Islam to be true is that it's not false. That's how I see Islam to be true. I try to find reasons for it to be false. And if it's not false, it has to be true. And a lot of people have tried. It's people's day jobs to try prove Islam false, like
Um,
Apostate Prophet, but nothing sticks. It's either a moral claim or aesthetic. You disapprove aesthetically. I
so
can't find anything that sticks. To be honest,
I'm kind of confused. So you're saying
yeah,
you came to it being true because you couldn't find anything that could prove it was false?
that's one of the many compounding reasons.
Okay, one of the
Yeah,
reasons. What I mean, that I have to be honest, that doesn't make sense to me, because what if there's a possibility
yeah,
that
sure.
there is something, let's talk hypothetically, that there is something that would show that something is false, but we just don't know it yet. Do we conclude that it's true then?
Are you using scientific? So I
No,
believe
no,
you turned.
I mean,
Yeah.
just not even scientific, like just like at the
Okay,
most
but that's
basic level.
empirical, right? Because that's the whole empirical mindset. We can't say anything is certain because we could have something that just proves it false straight away. So I don't think we can apply it to the Islam because Islam isn't science and it's not prone to empirical scrutiny,
Well, what is it prone to then?
theological scrutiny, and logical scrutiny.
So Okay, so I mean, the thing that I'm struggling with here is
Sure.
because there's like, I mean, if you just substituted Islam for another religion, or just said something else, like, I mean, you could frame,
I know
you
what you're
could
trying to say. I get
okay.
it. I look. I went for the train of thought at that
Well,
time.
let me explain it just so
Sorry.
people
Go ahead.
watching
Sorry.
can understand.
Uh-huh.
So what I'm trying to say is that you could probably conceptualize and frame a religion and design it in a way in which you can't prove that it's wrong, or that there's no way, like there's nothing you can say to prove it, that it's false logically,
Hmm.
theologically. That doesn't necessarily make it true, does it?
But then that's why we have messengers of
Okay,
messengers of
okay,
God.
so with that out of the way, then we're going. Okay, we'll go
Okay.
on to the messengers.
Yeah.
So you're
Because I
talking
can
about.
say because the thing is right. I can say right now that X reason God exists, but I'm not a messenger of God. And typically, this question has been asked a lot throughout the history of times. But then these prophets can perform miracles to prove their divinity, so to speak. So I get the train of what you're getting to. If you want to continue,
No, no, like, I mean, like, now that we got that out of the way,
yeah.
so you're saying it's so what about the messengers would you say confirms Islam for you?
The fact the fact that they can commit miracles, they can perform, they can break physics, they can break the scientific norms that we understand.
So,
They can
so,
break logic, really.
so just to make sure I understand, so you mean messengers like
The
Muhammad,
Abrahamic, yeah,
the Abrahamic ones?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
how do you know that they performed or committed
Testimony,
miracles? Testimony.
yep. Which is the basis of knowledge in human society. It is the basis of knowledge. To be quite honest, yep. But go ahead.
So, is there any part of you that wonders if, like, maybe that testimony was erroneous, like mistaken, or maybe it was not meant to be literal, perceived as literal fact?
Well, there's two forms of information. So we have the Quran and Hadith. Hadith is testimony. It's a compendium of sorts of saying, sorry, observations and musings of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. There's grading as well. So we grade it as to how accurate it is, and if there is like a weakness in the link, we call for how it is and we throw it out. But if it's accurate, we then um, we see for how it is. But it's all axiomatic, really. But also test of. I know we're trying to train on what you're going to, but how Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was only born 1400 years ago.
Mhm.
That's like yesterday in terms of anthropological like side of things, because like we know things from like Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, Enduhana, Sargon the Akkad. So 1400 years ago is pretty recent, to be quite honest.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So let's keep the hadith aside, like just talking
Okay.
about the things that the messengers
Hmm.
did
Hmm.
based on testimony.
Yeah.
How can you say for certainty that the testimonies for those things are accurate?
Because they're graded. Because they're graded accuracy, and there's a
So
massive chain of transmission that's been kept alive since 1400 years ago, and you can see literally the person per person how it goes down. You can see that in clear terms.
no, but I mean, like, we don't get the miracles of like the messengers
Okay,
from the hadith, right?
I beg your pardon.
So when you're talking about the miracles of the
Yeah,
messengers, so I mean, there's some stuff that I mean, I can't think of an example now, but there's probably some stuff about things Muhammad did
yeah,
in
yeah.
the hadith. But let's talk about, let's say, things Jesus did, or Moses, or Ibrahim, or whoever. Um, so the source of that is the hadith, right? It's like you're talking about the Quran.
But so yeah, but obviously Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam confirmed his divinity by the Prophet. So as we can see, he's a prophet because he committed miracles. What he brings out in terms of the Quran, it reaffirms what the prophets did prior, and that's why That's why I believe Quran even came in the first place, just to reaffirm what happened prior. So there is no hadith for Jesus, but there's the Quran testimony. So there's the Quran reaffirming what happened prior. Whatever we said, whatever is said in the Quran, we affirm. I don't know about the New Testament. I can't really affirm that because
Yeah.
it's a bit awkward. But in terms of the Quran, whatever it says in the Quran, as Muhammad Sallallahu is a prophet and he's able to split the moon and do break rocks into dust and whatever, and he had thousands of people observing. So as we can verify he's a prophet, we can verify what he says is true.
So okay, I'm trying to understand this then. So okay, so we have the we have the chain and we have the
Yeah,
grading. So to me, that would indicate at the I mean at most that what was said was accurate to the like say that that person
yeah.
said that thing. That doesn't you wouldn't say that that necessarily means that what that person said was the truth, would you? Because there's a difference between someone saying something and knowing that person said it and knowing that what that person said is true.
But
Those
what
are
is the
two,
basis of knowledge?
those are two
What
different things, right?
because I think with this we're going into the basis of knowledge. How do we define basis of knowledge? Because you're saying I think what you're trying to get at is like I have blind faith. I'm assuming what's being said is true, and
Um,
am I in blind faith that what's being said is said? But like, what is the basis of knowledge and what we assume is to be true? Because that's the real conversation, isn't it?
well, I don't know that yet because I'm just trying to figure it out.
But it's a bigger philosophical question because it's more about like how do we know is Hadoop to be true? Am I assuming it to be true based off what someone said? But can I not assume anything? Can I not scrutinize everything can I not scrutinize every word that's ever been said past the last 5 minutes?
Well, okay, I'll put it this way. I get what you're saying too. To me, there's different kinds of things that you could rely on for like people's testimony, and I mean, like one example I could give, and I've heard this example being given by other people, is if your friend said they adopted a dog, you've never seen this dog, you're gonna probably assume it's a fact that your friend has a dog. Because why? Because it's a mundane claim. It's not that big of a deal. If they lied about that, it would be probably strange. It is
Yeah,
possible that it's not true, but it's a mundane claim, so you probably wouldn't look into it that much. But if that person were to say, "I adopted a dog and that dog can fly," which would be, I would say, like something that would probably break the rule, like the laws of physics as we understand them,
yeah.
or like be supernatural, if you want to use that word. You would probably want more than just that person's testimony to confirm that the dog can fly, wouldn't you?
I
Can you see the point I'm making? Like there's there when you're talking about something that is supposed to be a miracle, something that
yeah, yeah,
defies
yeah.
the laws of the universe as we understand them, I feel like there needs to be a higher standard than
Does
just the
that?
testimony that we do rely on, as you
Yeah,
said, for many things.
but it was not. So obviously, like, I get what you're saying. So you're trying to say is like if one person walked by, they give you a single source of information to tell you something, you can take it on face value, but you can't. So you can't really take it seriously if it's only one person saying it. In terms of the thieves, there's multiple observations for the same device. So like same instance. But let's just say for example, right now, let's just say for example, I see uh an apparition. Let's just say I see a supernatural being. I see it myself. I may see. Have you watched the butterfly effect, the bunny over the knife? Let's just say I see that.
Mhm.
If I tell you that, you probably think I'm crazy. However, if three people tell you that, you'll probably think, okay, this is maybe reasonable. If 10 people see that, you probably think, okay, this may be a coincidence. So it comes down to the reliability of the sources as well as the separation from insanity to possible actual activity. To be quite honest, so I see what you're getting, but it can be dispelled by with numericity, the numbers of observation.
Well, to me, you would have to add a few things if you were to talk about like the specific, like a specific miracle, because we would have to go back. First of all, this is something that's supposed to have happened 1400 years ago, and you
Okay.
also have to wonder about wonder about the motivation of the people who made that testimony to make it. So let's say
Okay. 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 Okay.
I'm only saying this because there is that possibility that I mean, you could make that argument, for example, with Christianity and Jesus being resurrected, which I think someone in the live chat also mentioned.
Okay.
That, you know, people testified that they saw Jesus risen, and perhaps their incentive for doing so was because they wanted to keep the teachings and the myth around Jesus alive and strong, to perpetuate whatever that religion was at that point. So in that
Okay.
sense, you can kind of maybe see that people can give testimony to be with an incentive for some purpose.
Okay. Well, you would
Beyond
need
that,
testimony for that. So you would need testimony to make that claim, because what you're trying to say is, what if they were compelled militarily at their life to say what was said? But you would need to. There's no smoke without fire, so you would need to verify those claims, because you could scrutinize everything that's ever been spread by that logic. Because you could, so for example, I'm trying to think of a famous quote. I was going to say "even you, Brutus," but that's William Shakespeare. But I'm trying to think of a quote that can be scrutinized. I forgot to scrap it. But like, what I'm trying to say is, you can scrutinize everything that's ever been said by that logic. And it just leads us nowhere, because from the basis of our knowledge is testimony until proven otherwise. And if you're trying to say is, whoever was there to observe Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam splitting the moon was compelled to say it at fear of death, um,
oh
there's
no,
no
I mean,
evidence to suggest otherwise. There's no hadith to
I
suggest
mean,
they were compelled. But like, I know, like, also I'm trying to be provocative as possible by saying the
yeah.
moon split. I understand people are thinking this guy's crazy, but that's the standard narrative, and there is no evidence to suggest otherwise. Then if we can say what if to this, we can say what if to anything, but that leads us nowhere at all.
Well, okay. I don't want to get too far into this, but although this is interesting,
Sure,
and
yeah,
I
I love
do
it.
appreciate you like bearing with me with these questions. Well, last thing I kind of want to go into it and just like maybe give you something to think about. What is let's go back to like that example I mentioned of like a friend with a dog who claims they have a dog. So you go to see them, and it turns out they don't have a dog. Then you realize, oh well, this friend is a liar. He's
Yeah,
capable of lying, and it will change your perspective on them. If we were to give another example of, you know, there's a country called Australia. You've never
okay,
been there,
yeah,
but you fly over there, and it's exactly where it's supposed to be on the map, and you step on it and you see it, and like people are like, oh, this
yeah.
is Australia. Here's our flag. Blah 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 blah.
Well,
Um,
you need to do it. Do you need to fly to Australia to know it exists, though, right?
um, you,
You could
I
take
well,
testimony, can't you?
you could take testimony, but here's why I'm getting at this, because
Sure.
what you're doing is you're using this testimony. So these are two mundane things. Like, I mean, if it turns out your
Yeah,
friend
yeah,
is a
yeah.
liar, he's a liar. Okay, it's not the end of the world. And I mean, if Australia turned out to not exist, that would be pretty
Yeah.
disturbing. But anyway, aside from that, what's kind of troubling me is that these testimonies are being used as the basis for the religion that is uh, the source of what the meaning of life is, and that is coming from the creator of the universe and everything. So it's like you have to use that to jump to this huge massive thing that is like the foundation and cornerstone of everything. And
Yeah, okay.
so just so you can understand where I'm coming
Yeah,
from,
yeah, yeah.
was because I had the same thoughts as you. I was raised in Islam as well,
Yeah, yeah.
and learned all the sorts of things that I'm sure you learned. And when I saw it from that kind of perspective,
Yeah.
I thought that I needed something more. Um, when you want to talk about the Quran,
Yeah.
so I believe that the Quran was like a perfect miracle and that it couldn't be man made.
Okay.
Is that something you like? Is that a belief that you share?
So, sorry, what could you rephrase the sentence, because I couldn't hear you?
The Quran is perfect
Yeah.
and it couldn't be man made.
Yeah, I believe that. That's the standard narrative.
Okay. So here's a thing that this is an idea I had and I
Yeah.
was just wondering what you think about it. So what I was thinking was, and this is, I'm not saying that this is likely. I'm not saying that this is um, something I believe,
Yeah.
but what I realized was a possibility I couldn't rule out. And here's what
Yeah.
it is.
Go
What
on.
I was thinking was, let's just say for argument's sake that the Quran couldn't have been man-made. Does that necessarily mean that everything in it is true? So that's question one. And two, does that necessarily mean that it had to come from the creator of the universe?
So if you're saying it's not man-made,
Yeah, let's say it's not man-made.
you're
We
saying that you're
we
ruling out
definitively,
humans being, so in
yeah.
your ideal worldview, like only you believe in materialism, so you only believe in humans and that kind of stuff. You don't believe in apparition. So it would be a logical fallacy of sorts, because if it's in this example of this world you make, there is no creator, but there's a non-man-made item being made, non-man-made item being made. It breaks logic. To be honest, the universe would implode from the lack of logic. So I don't know how to answer it, because
Well, could there be something that isn't humans but also isn't God in the universe?
what are you trying, like Galactus in the Marvel universe? Are you trying to say?
Well, okay, let's say like what if there's this really super powerful, let's say an alien species, super powerful alien species, and they just sent the message of the Quran to us uh, deceitfully, and they're not actually uh, the creator of the
Oh
universe.
God, yeah,
So I know it sounds ridiculous, but the thing that kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
blew my mind was I don't think I could rule that possibility out. I couldn't
But that's
definitively
insane.
say that it's
Yeah,
false. You could, because you could argue that this alien species is very knowledgeable, far more knowledgeable than
yeah,
us, understand scientific things that we didn't know at the time, understand things about the universe that we didn't know at the time, and that we still don't know. And so, to us, from our perspective, it
yeah.
would seem like um, they they have the knowledge of a creator, and maybe they're pretending to be the creator for some purpose of their own. I know it all sounds ridiculous, but following that line of thought, I realized I couldn't say that this isn't possible.
But I think this level of skepticism has its boundaries, because I'll try to be respectful, Liam. I'll take this seriously, but I'll take this as seriously as I can.
Well,
So
the hypothetical thing is silly, but my point
yeah,
is serious.
but do you not believe in science? You can't rule anything out. So you can't rule out Galactus making the Quran.
Galactus from Marvel. Is
Yeah,
Galactus from Marvel? I don't even know.
but can you rule out a Galactus type of figure making the Quran?
Well, it depends on how the attributes that
It
you would give
depends.
Galactus. But I mean, like, if you were to say, let's have something that is this really powerful being that we don't know anything about. No, I would say we couldn't necessarily rule it out.
I just don't. It's a hard sell. I just thing is with that, you know, I'm trying to logically think it through, but it's hard. It's a hard sell, because with that kind of skepticism, you can define. You can't even rule four out, Silver Surfer. And I think there is limits to logic. I think it's more reasonable to assume to say that there's a God, a formless God that's made the universe, as opposed to a galactic planetary being who made the Quran just to fool people to believe in a monotheistic God, which speaks against ruling Galactus. It would break logic, and I just that's what I have a problem with. I don't have a problem with science, but I do believe it has its limits, and I don't believe it can answer everything, because everything's a possibility, and I don't believe everything under science. Everything is a possibility. I don't know if you read Nassim Talib's Black Swan, where
I actually own it.
it's pretty good.
Small world. Yeah, it is a
Yeah,
good book. Yeah.
yeah. So with that logic, it's just you can't rule something out until it happens, and I just don't believe. I find it hard. I think it's a hard sell, to be quite honest.
I understand where you're coming
Yeah,
from. What I'd say
yeah,
what I'd say about it is this, and then we can move on.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
For me, what conclusion I reached was, so there are things that are, let's say, more mundane. You know, that
yeah,
the sun rises, the sun sets. There are other people I can communicate with, and when I communicate with them, they communicate back with me. And if I, run into a wall, it's going to hurt. So those are the kinds of things that I realized. Okay, well, I can see these effects, I can see these impacts,
Yeah.
and uh, beyond that, like things like how a car works or a plane works,
Yeah. Yeah.
these are
Yeah.
things that are testable and they can be replicated. And so we as a human society have kind of developed this way of life
Yeah.
based on these things. Where I drew the line with my skepticism was I can't rule out the things that are like possibly problematic in proving that certain things like a creator god or Islam or whatever are real. So I'm not going to believe them until I see something that definitively proves they're real. And so in that sense, you could say I'm agnostic, because I'm not saying that I
Yeah.
know that they aren't, but I'm not going to also
Yeah.
do the same thing or sort of the opposite thing and say that I know that they are
Yeah.
when I don't have that information. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, to be quite honest, there's a relationship between like atheists and like theists in general, and like atheists feel theists as stupid, observe, and denying the obvious, which is there's no God. And to be quite honest, Muslims have the same kind of relationship, because like the fact that we can't rule out everything, it seems absurd that you don't have the anchorage to say a Galactus type figure doesn't exist, or planetary beings, or the most hypothetical, like even if it's a probability of like 1.1 to like a trillion possibility, we can't rule it out. It's it's just a line of contention, because atheists, their whole philosophy is, how dare you be certain? How about you be certain about uncertainty? So that's the sorry for not sorry, I'm thirsty, to be quite honest. I've talked a lot, but that's what I feel.
No, I see your points, but okay, well, let me ask you this question. Like, to you, what would you say atheism is exactly? Like, would you say it is a life philosophy?
Ah, so not there's different strands of atheism. There's atheism where they believe there's no God.
Hmm.
They believe in materialism, and there's agnostic where they can't rule out anything. They can't rule out. They're not going to say God exists, but they're not going to say God doesn't exist, but they have the same kind of view about God existing. They just say I don't know. So that's my view about atheism in general. I think there's two branches: agnosticism and atheism.
Okay. Um, like, what would you say? So let's talk about both categories if you
Yeah,
want.
yeah.
What would you say people who are atheists or agnostics are missing in life? Like, what are
Morals.
the morals?
Sorry
Okay.
if I said too quickly, but yeah,
No, 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 no.
morals.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So, would you like? Are you saying that people who are atheists and agnostics, they don't have morals?
No, you have no anchorage. It's relative to the times. So, like 2,000 years ago, sorry, about 3,000 years ago, it may have been bad to be homosexual. Fast forward 500 years in Greek and Rome, it's acceptable to have a man. It's a man side chick side. How's that side boy? However the phraseology is. Even Julius Caesar even committed to it, but then 500 years later, seems wrong. There is no sorry, comment. So with atheism, in terms of morals, it's just subject to whatever time it is, whatever's practical at that time. So you said prior that rape isn't good because it isn't practical. It may be a time where it may have to be practical for repopulation. Furthermore, I in terms of the atheists and how they feel about theism, whatever they may seem as like aesthetically not pleasing and not practical, in terms of religion, Islam, they may actually agree with it in 50 years. And it just leaves us in a bit of a, like a, sorry, I'm a bit thirsty. It is in a tough spot because there's no anchorage and anything goes. So at the moment, there's more acceptability for trans rights and LGBTQ. In about 50 years, we may see furries being socially acceptable walking the streets. And 100 years, we might all revert back to the beginning and start go back to binary man woman and same sex conventional relationships. So we're just ahead of the curve. We stick to how it is. We're not we're like we don't adapt to how life where life takes us. We have our morals as theists, and we stick to them, and we don't break or bend them. Finished.
Okay. So here's what I feel about it. So I would say I would agree with you that uh, if you were to talk to atheists or whatever, like people who are using that kind of grounding, it is relative to their time and their culture,
Yeah.
and things that were considered wrong could be considered right at a different point, and vice versa. So I have 2 points to make on that.
Yeah.
One, that isn't necessarily a bad thing, because you could, for example, maybe like at some point in time, we didn't understand something very well, and once we got the better understanding, we changed how we viewed something, and because of that, our morality regarding it changed as well, for the better. So that's a possibility, and I think that's something that has happened. And two, I
Yeah.
think that religion isn't exempt from
Okay.
this objective. I mean, sorry, this lack of
Yeah.
objective morality. Because if you just look at the evolution and development of religions, even the major big ones, even what they consider to be right and wrong, like, and by that I mean like the followers and how the tradition is perceived, has changed, and has been impacted by the culture, the regional culture, and the times. So I don't think you can escape that if you're claiming that you're getting your morality from religion. And I'll give you an example. I'm sure
Sure.
you'll have an opinion on this,
Yeah. Sure.
but
Sure. Sure.
once upon a time, slavery
Yeah.
was accepted and widespread
Yeah.
throughout the world. I mean, it still
Yeah.
exists to a certain extent today,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
Um, uh, but then the culture changed and the viewpoint changed, and so, in my opinion, my viewpoint, what has happened is that people now want to reframe their ancient religions to seem as if they were opposed to slavery when they actually condoned it. So yeah, just what's your opinion on that?
Okay. If you could remind me, I'm going to answer your first point, and if you could remind me what you said uh, right now about slavery, that'd be great. But in
Sure.
terms of the first point, you said that lack of morality could not be bad. I'd say it could be terrible because, like I said before, it's relative and it's down to practicality. If you look at Soviet Russia and North Korea, like in Soviet Russia, like a box of metal scrap would be worth more than a human being. And atheism was tested to its limits, and the lack of morality was absolute treasure. I think one of the most worst times in human society in general was possibly the time World War II ended and the Russians moved into East Germany and whatever went happened there. But even before that, in World War II, they did not. Stalin did not give a single crap about humans in general, and that's what a lack of morality can do. I'm not saying all atheists are black or soulless beings, but the point is practicality and relativistic times. And furthermore, we can go to North Korea. Presently, China, as you're probably aware, has are atheists. They have like. Uh, I'm breaking up trying to speak about it, but we know what's happening with the Uyghurs. I'm not saying what they're doing is a representation of all atheists, but they are atheists and uh, they're testing into the limits. And I believe what's happening right now is worse than is probably one of the worst catastrophes that's ever happened in the history of the world. Uh, to be quite honest, you could possibly contest me. I probably will agree with you. But also, furthermore, your second point was that in terms of morality, objective morality, people change and backpedal over time. Christianity, mate, there may be gay pastors and same-sex weddings, but Islam doesn't, unless it's a sect. But the mainstream Islam, certainly 90% of its Muslims, we don't break or bend of morality. In terms of slavery, we still view it as moral relative to terms. We don't backpedal, and we don't. Slavery wasn't as bad in Islamic times as it was in Louisiana. Slaves had a lot of rights. They were pretty good. They were pretty. As you're probably aware, as you're Palestinian, you're next to Egypt. You probably are aware of the Mamluks, their superiority, and the fact that slaves became the equivalent of prime ministers in modern terms. Whatever happened in Islamic terms, Islamic lands happen in Islamic lands. We can't speak of what happens in Louisiana or in Mongolia or in Africa or even Jamaica in those terms. We can only speak for ourselves. If there is uh, people transgressing, then I speak against it. But what we believe is moral, we believe is moral, and I'm sure you do have opinions on that as well. But
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah, I'll share them. So
I'm so
I'll share.
sorry. Can I? Can I? I'm really thirsty. Can I just run and get some water if that's cool?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll just check in with
One
some
sec.
people in the
Uh,
live chat while you do that.
just 1 second.
Sure. So yeah, lots of familiar faces here. Hassan Radwan, welcome. Robert is here as well. Gerwak, Potato Apostado. Thank you for all tuning in. Wesley Potts is over here as well. Uh, Imran, yeah, lots of familiar faces. Glad you could join. Um, there's so much I really want to talk to Al about, and I know I've seen a lot of your questions. I'm trying to ask as many as possible while trying to keep the conversation going. So we'll keep it going. And if you are interested in me doing more of these kinds of dialogues of Muslims, there's a poll question in the live chat. Like, would you like to see me do more dialogues of Muslims like this one? Yes or
I am
no?
back.
Let me know.
So
And
I just
Al
want
is
to clarify
back.
one thing before people call me a slavery apologist. I believe in slavery within the context as it is allowed in Islam, prisons of wars, because
Yeah,
obviously the choice is
yeah.
either kill them, send them back to their enemies, or have indentured servants. But that's my. I don't believe in grabbing nets like in like Wile E. Coyote, and it's like grabbing a net over someone. But yeah,
Well, I have a question. I did have a question for you about that.
yeah.
Why do you think slavery isn't as common in the Muslim world now as it was, let's say, I don't know, 1,000 years ago or whatever?
Sorry, can you beg your pardon? Sorry.
Yeah. Why do you think slavery isn't as common now in the Muslim world as it was, let's say, around 1,000 years ago?
It's a complicated question because I feel that it is to an extent, but it's just glossed up as it isn't.
So it's
Yeah.
slavery is just not called slavery.
To an extent. So it's basically like, as you're aware, in Arab countries, they have my brethren and Indians coming over there, treated like crap, paid very very little, minimal. So I wouldn't say it's slavery, but if you ask me why there isn't slavery now in Arabia, as probably because we don't go through wars as much. Slaveries are captured through war, and so I don't imagine Syria going to war with Libya and uh, capturing Libyans and then forcing them to work because they have prisons. They have somewhere to put them without fear of being attacked. So I imagine why there's no slaves right now is because um, the reasons why there were slaves prior, there is no reasons for them now to to be enslaved. So in a
Aren't
pragmatic sense, that's what I think.
aren't there wars happening in the Muslim world right now?
Which ones?
Well, I mean, like one example I can just think off the top of my head is like the
Sure.
one between Saudi and Yemen.
Yeah. I don't know. To be honest, you'd have to ask the Saudi government, which I don't believe, why they don't keep slaves. I don't think I can answer that. Also, Saudi is refraining from Islam. They're not really the Islamic name, but I can't really speak for Islamic society, civilization in a whole. I can only give my outlook and speak about things, but I can't really explain why slavery isn't present at the moment. I can just say right now that the the reasons why we had slaves before wouldn't be the same as we're in a more modern era, and we have prisons now. We have places to keep people, and furthermore, like I said, with Arab countries, Saudi Arabia employs a lot of foreign workers, which they treat like crap, and yeah, I don't know what else to say.
Okay, I mean, we don't have to get into this anymore. My personal viewpoint is
Yeah,
that um, slavery was considered acceptable at one point in time.
Yeah.
Culture and society's viewpoint on it changed beyond the world of Islam, and that changed how the Muslim world treated people to the point where slavery doesn't really exist anymore, or nowhere near as much as it used to, or there's people like migrant workers who I
Yeah.
wouldn't compare to slaves, despite
Yeah.
the fact that they might have horrible living conditions in some cases. Or
We don't consider it immoral though. So like just because we may not do it doesn't mean we consider it officially immoral. So yeah.
I mean, again, we don't have to get into this anymore. I just feel
Yeah.
like we just disagree about that.
Yeah.
I think like the main point I wanted to make is I think a religion like Islam is perceived as not having ever changed, but I think it has, and we can agree to disagree on that.
But is Islam
Um,
a hegemony? Is so is Islam a uniting is Islam a concept or is it a collection of countries? What is Islam to you?
so I would say people practicing Islam to the best of their ability, following the the doctrine and
That wouldn't
the things that they're
yeah.
supposed to do, and avoiding the things that they're not supposed to do.
But that I wouldn't I would classify the rulings of the Quran and Hadith as Islam, and they haven't been changed. Besides, so just because there may be a liberal right now in Canada, New York or whatever, they may have different opinions that whatever someone in Saudi or in a conservative household may have. It doesn't mean Islam as a whole is bent or broken. We have our beliefs. We accept whatever is in the Quran and Hadith. That doesn't mean Islam as a whole, as an idea, has changed. For instance, into if you'd asked the Saudi the sorry, if you'd asked the Vatican what was it if their morals would change, they'll say being gay is okay. But even those, I have my own opinions on it, but we would never say that. But we would still say whatever is enforced through Sharia is moral and acceptable. We wouldn't really break apart that, to be honest.
Well, what I think is happening, and this is something that happens in all religions and has
Yeah.
always happened, is you could look at the same text
Yeah.
and just decide to interpret it in a different way based on your specific time period and cultural circumstances. So you could argue that someone could really be looking at this one thing from the Quran or whatever and saying, well, I can just have slaves, but then someone could look at it 500 years later and say, oh well, it's only for prisoners of war in certain specific conditions, and then blah 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 blah, and they could both argue that they're right, if that makes sense.
But those two individuals are not the personification of the edifice of Islam.
Well, that's one of those things where, like, if you kind of like view it at that point, like who is then, like, or is there something that is the actual? Well, but what I'm not talking about two random individuals. I'm talking about just like the scholars of that time period, the people who are considered the.
But not all scholars are equal. Like Mufti Abu Layth isn't like.
No. I agree with you. Well, like that's kind of my point, that it's like this. It's this thing that shifts and changes depending on who it is and what time period it is. But
we have credibility, right? So like in all aspects of real life, like we have credibility, and who we consider to be a verifiable person we take serious, and who we don't take serious. We take the people who are qualified and we take their opinions as serious, but we confirm we'd consider quacks to be quacks, to be quite honest. So that's our standard.
And that can depend on several cultural factors, political factors. Maybe this one mufti got on the wrong side of the other ones, and then
but then we see for how it is,
quack.
But then
maybe
we see for how it is. Like Bin Baz, like Sheikh Bin Baz, right? But he's a Saudi Arabian mufti from 20 years ago. He said some crazy things, like the moon didn't exist, or some crazy stuff. We saw for how it was, and we didn't accept it.
Okay, well, Islam, you're using like an extreme, like, which is like ridiculous.
No, but he was the Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia. He was the Grand Mufti. We see things for how they are.
I know, but like, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that are a bit murkier than things that might be more obvious, like the example that you mentioned. But let's not get too bogged into
Sure,
it.
yeah.
Sorry. I did want to just address something you mentioned a little bit earlier. I just made a mental note to remember.
Yeah, sure.
So, to your point about, Stalinist Russia and communist China.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, here's my thing that I find the problem with what you said there is.
Yeah.
I don't think you can. So there's some things that you can say, like let's say about Islam, that you can say, well, this thing specifically came from Islam and what you're supposed to do as a Muslim. I don't think you can say that uh,
Yeah.
how communists in China or Russia viewed human beings and their value, or how they massacred people, came from their atheism specifically. Do you know what
Yeah,
I
I'm not
mean?
saying that at all. I'm not applying. I'm
Well,
not
but
saying Hitler is Stalin,
you're
but he has an
making that.
anchorage.
So so you're saying that if you don't have an anchorage, that inevitably leads to things like communist Russia and China and like.
But it entails it. I'm not saying theist can't be bad. But if you're an atheist and you have an anchorage and you don't value human life, terrible things can happen and it has happened. Genghis Khan. Sorry, Genghis Khan. I'm getting a call. Sorry, 1 moment.
No worries.
Uh, Testing. So I'm back.
Yeah, you're back.
I've lost my train of thought. So I'm not blaming. I'm not putting atheism in the spotlight. I'm saying, talking about in terms of morality and the lack of anchorage and what it can lead to. I struggle to recollect in history.
Al, you there? Hello? Al, I think we lost you. Oh, yeah, you're back.
Sorry, what was I speaking about?
So just to kind of recap a bit, I was saying
Yeah.
that you can't definitively say that what those people did in certain countries, like let's say talk about Stalinist Russia, they did it
Yeah.
because of their atheism. And I would add to that, I think I don't think you have to be religious to value human life. I think you can be an
Sorry, I'm so
atheist.
sorry. Can I I need to open the door. Can you bear
Sure,
me on? I'm so sorry for being rude. Bear with me 1 moment.
sure. Go ahead. Uh, yeah. Thanks, Wesley. I agree with your point there. Atheists don't just flatly disregard human life. And you also make the point that the state could always be a moral anchor. Well, I mean, I guess what Al's point is that uh, if your moral anchor isn't God, then it's just there's something that's shaky and that can just kind of, you know, change and be loose, and that you can't really ground anything on it. But yeah, I mean, I guess we just agree to disagree on that one. Al, you back?
Sorry, I am. I'm just trying to find my key. Bear me 1 moment. Trying to open the
Sure,
door. Bear with me. Just wait a minute.
sure. I think because we probably won't have much more time, I want to just divert the last part of the discussion, and I'm going to mention this to Al, to just talking about the afterlife, because he had a few questions for me about the afterlife. And Hassan Radwan asked an interesting question. I'd be interested in Al's view on hell. Does he believe it is eternal for some or finite for all? I've heard, I mean, I know Muslims who believe both, like both different versions. So I guess we'll find out. I'll save that one for in a little bit. Hey, brother Ben, I'm gonna have to do something to dispel this
Hey, I'm sorry. I'm
rumor.
back.
Oh no worries, Al. I was just gonna
Whew.
dispel this rumor that me and sorry, Apostate Aladdin and I are the same person. It's been around for a while. Just look at our eyebrows; they're completely different. um, I
Yeah.
was
So
joking
my
about this. Oh, sorry.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, you. Sorry, you're trying to. So I'm out of breath. So
No, it
carry
doesn't
on.
matter. We can get back onto things. So, Al, what I wanted to do
Yeah.
was, because I know you mentioned that you might have to leave in about 5 or 10
10 minutes.
minutes.
But yeah.
10 minutes. Okay. So I was thinking that maybe we could just cap off this discussion by talking about the afterlife. I know you had
Sure.
a few questions for me about it, and there was this question for you from Hassan Radwan in the live chat. Just interested to know what your viewpoint on hell is. Do you believe it is eternal, or for some, or is it finite for all?
It's complicated because I don't want to be speaking on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the complicated part. I don't want to speak on
Yeah.
behalf of Islam, but from what
Well,
I understand,
frame it. Yeah, frame it as what you personally believe from your understanding.
so I believe if you're if you're a kafir, you'll be there for the rest of eternity, depending on if you got the right message of Islam. However, what if you're a Muslim, but if you live a terrible life, you'll spend quite a bit of time in hell, but you'll eventually get out. That's I believe, if I recall correctly, as per Quran narrative. But I don't want to be saying you're going to go to hell, you're going to go to hell. I can't
Okay.
give that judgment.
So the judgment is with God, but I
Yeah,
mean, okay, you don't have to say yes or no to
yeah,
this, but like what that makes me feel is that because I left Islam and
yeah,
I reject God's existence, that
yeah.
I'm condemned to go to hell for eternity,
Okay.
which I feel like is you don't have to comment on this if you
Yeah,
don't want
sure.
to. It's just I just feel that's really harsh, especially because I genuinely feel like I tried to believe.
Yeah,
I really did. It wasn't easy for me to leave.
yeah.
I don't have a resentment of Islam per se or like what it did
It
or like
doesn't feel like you do, to be honest. You don't really. Yeah, you don't. You're not like a positive prophet. So yeah. Okay.
so I mean this kind of ties into what you're talking about. This is going off tangent, sorry.
Yeah, yeah,
But this is something you mentioned earlier, like when you talk about like the cesspit
yeah.
that ex-Muslim forms can sometimes be.
You're not.
So
Give credit. You're not.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for that. I just wanted to make one note that I do
yeah,
agree with you that there's a lot of like trolling kind of stuff and
yeah,
really harsh stuff. And what I wanted to just explain to you is that what you're seeing is just people who have been, you know, repressing themselves and not saying anything, and
yeah,
maybe going through really tough times with family members who maybe could argue they're not following Islam properly or not. I don't know about that. When you see that kind of stuff, it's people venting
yeah. I understand.
and just needing some sort of outlet and
Yeah,
like
yeah,
needing to speak out. So I wouldn't necessarily judge them harshly on that like
yeah,
specifically.
yeah.
Obviously, if you were to meet an ex-Muslim and they're just like that all the time and they're talking to you in a horrible way, feel free to judge them.
To be honest, obviously, if I'm going to go to an ex-Muslim subreddit, I see for what it is. Obviously, in an ex-Muslim subreddit, they may like say they may speak about their parents or this and that, or having helicopter parents who, if they don't pray Fajr, they're going to get like a shoe to the head or whatever. But in terms of your question about how, why do you feel so why do you feel so disheartened that you're going to spend the eternity in hell? Why do you feel disheartened for? And do you feel that entails it being not existing?
So well, okay, well, how about we tie this into the question that you had in mind for me like before we started the live stream. You wanted to ask me basically what are my
Okay, yeah.
thoughts on that the afterlife. I can kind of just talk about it all in one go
Yeah,
here.
yeah. It wasn't a polemical question. I wanted to like obviously like like pick your brain about death. From what I remember, like I wanted to ask you about how do you feel about the just the it's more of an anthropological question. Like how do you feel about the Allah and the kind of reverence for death as humans in a society, and like the after, like have you ever come to terms with your own mortality and felt it at all?
So okay, I'll try to be quick responding to this. So one of the hardest parts of leaving Islam for me was opening myself to the possibility that when I die, I will just cease to exist. Everything
Yeah,
that I am, everything that I was is just gone. Like there's no
yeah,
me thinking or feeling anymore. I'll never experience anything again. And that was so
yeah,
depressing, so upsetting. I didn't want it. I didn't want to believe it.
yeah,
And I just had to come to this realization that if I'm following the logic of where I'm following and like truly applying my skepticism to the things that I'm learning about Islam or looking at Islam in a new light, I have to accept and live my life in a way in which there is no afterlife. I'm not saying that there
yeah,
isn't one for sure, but I
yeah.
decided to not act as if there is one.
Okay.
So tied to that is I think we as humans we put a lot of emphasis on death because it's this big thing that we fear because we can't
Yeah,
understand it and we don't really know what's on the other side. Like there's people who've claimed they know what's on the other side, but none of us really know 100% sure beyond just faith. Like let's say talk about scientifically, empirically, that there's an afterlife.
Oh, come
Uh,
on, you. But I feel like the sorry to cut, I think the science is a question. Public is a straw man because I don't think you can apply everything to scientific standard. You just can't. You can't apply love or hate or anger
well,
and
that's
or
why
hell.
that's
Yeah,
why I added that just to clarify
yeah,
that that's what I mean. Like maybe you
yeah,
could argue metaphysically or philosophically there has to be one. I don't know, but that's what I mean.
yeah,
Like I didn't want to go down that route, and so what that did for me, and I think what it does for humanity is it just adds a lot of significance and
yeah,
importance to the lives we have because it could be the only thing that we know we have for sure. I think for me personally, what it has led to is I've tried to I've tried to follow the things that are important to me and
yeah,
to do the things that I think that I'm most passionate about and that are truest to me with more drive and desire than I would have if I thought that there was an afterlife because I could just literally drop dead right now from an aneurysm
yeah,
or I could be hit by a car tomorrow. And so I think as a human society, one of the things we've done is to grapple with this thing called death is we fear it, but we also maybe to use your word revere it a bit because it is the thing that you could argue might incentivize a lot of human action. You could maybe even argue, and this is
yeah,
what I argue could be possibly one of the reasons why religion exists in the first place is
yeah,
because we're facing this thing called death. We don't understand it. We don't know what for
yeah.
sure what comes after it. And so we invented these religions to just basically cope with how
Okay.
miserable life can be and how much suffering there is in life. And I can speak firsthand to how comforting Islam was for me. I mean, if I was to go back to when I was like 12 or
Yeah,
13 and I was still Muslim, I didn't have these big doubts. I didn't have this kind of sinking anxiety.
yeah,
So I'll be honest with you, and I think I've shared this on the live, like on a previous live stream, that
yeah,
I sometimes I think about just the concept of just not existing anymore, and it's a
yeah,
really strange feeling, and I don't like it. But I decided that the way I want to lead my life is I'm not gonna just avoid things and just because I don't like it, you know.
oh,
I've kind of looked at it as it is what it is, and I could just choose to be miserable. I could choose to just
yeah.
kill myself right now, or I could just make the most of it. And I felt that making the most of it is probably the best, is the thing that would make me happiest.
Okay. Can I ask you a follow-up question? So, do you feel because of this mindset, that you are fully selfless because you want to do things for the next generation? You're trying to basically, obviously, not. I'm trying to verbalize it. Do you feel like you're selfless because you don't feel there's a punishment or reward for death, so you're going to do it even if there is or not? So, do you feel selfless and do you feel it's a bit altruistic in a sense? If you know the train of thought I'm trying to
Yeah.
go on.
Well, I'm not a perfect person. I'm selfish. I can be selfish.
Oh, we all are. Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
be selfless. I try to be selfless, and I do self. I would say I do selfless, altruistic things that are maybe
Well,
against my best interest.
like this, like obviously, like if do you feel because obviously you're putting yourself at risk by this platform, but it's a
Yeah,
selfless act. It could be seen as a selfless act of a activist per se.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. But you could argue it's also selfish in the sense of, and I would say this is the truth that I feel compelled to do this. So it's for my sake as well. Like I need to express these things.
okay.
uh, for selfless reasons, but also just because like I feel compelled to. But I mean, like to me, I'm trying to do these sorts of things, or I try to do good things, or what I perceive good things to be. I don't want to do it just because of a possibility of a reward or a
Yeah,
punishment. I want to do it because I like it when I bring joy to people's lives.
yeah,
I like
yeah,
it when I diminish or like alleviate someone's suffering.
yeah,
um, and I want when I just think of all the needless suffering that exists in the world, I want the world to be a better place. Like I'm in it.
yeah,
I can't help
yeah,
caring about all these things. You could argue that this is all coming to me from God.
yeah.
I don't think so, but I'm just telling you that I have those things, and I don't need to believe in a God to want them and to pursue them.
Fair enough. I did think like that for quite a long time, to be quite honest. I did think like that. So I did think of basically like thinking like I can do something without being ordained to. Is it not selfish for me to do something for the benefit of myself in the hereafter? Why don't I just do it and
Yeah,
not try to
yeah,
get praise for it? But I think two things can be true at the same time. Like you can do something to please Allah, subhanahu, and you can help someone as well. I think they don't have to be separate.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree with you there. And I just want to answer this question from Date Palm in the live chat. Like, why should we do anything if life is meaningless? So, I, in a sense, do think that life is objectively meaningless, but we can give, like, we as humans can give it meaning. We can agree together as communities and societies to give it meaning. And here's the crazy thing: we are doing that. We're constantly doing that, whether through religion or through other things. So I don't necessarily see life being meaningless as this thing that just should send us into nihilism and dismay. If it's actually kind of, it's like, best way to look at it is like it's this open canvas, and then we can kind of paint things however we wish, and that's what we've been doing, and we've been figuring out the better ways to paint something
Yeah,
for whatever reason that we've decided we were doing it. Um,
but yeah,
Al, I just wanted to mention one thing before I forget. So, because I know you have to leave soon. So,
I really want to wrap up because I feel like you asked me a
yeah.
question and I
No, 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 no,
wasn't
no, no,
able
no.
to answer prior about Stalin, and
Oh,
if
okay,
we
yeah.
can go back to that, that'd be great. I just don't like to have a loose end, if
Okay,
that's
okay,
okay.
okay. I'll just make one point and I'll let you
Sure,
address
sure,
that, and then I can let you
sure.
go. So, I'll tell you what my grandparents, who died Muslim, who died
Yeah,
believers, believed about hell, and
yeah.
about, let's say, someone like me. So they didn't know that I was an atheist.
Okay.
They didn't know I left Islam. So they felt that God is this force of love and goodness,
Yeah,
and that there's no way that he would send someone to hell for eternity, even if this person didn't believe in them, because he loves all his creations. So I'm not saying that this is what you believe or what Islam teaches. I'm just saying that this is how I kind of viewed it. And if God were to exist, I hope that's how he would look at it. But I don't know.
I believe. I wish I could share the warm sentiment, but I do believe if you are a Kafir, you will burn in hell forever. It's you know what I'm mindful of feelings and understand that I'm not preaching to the choir,
Yeah,
and that may offend everyone here.
yeah.
But I just believe if you're being arrogant and for the sake of it you want to not believe in God,
You
you
can't
you
offer
you
the
get
carrot without the stick.
yeah, that's what I believe. Like
Yeah.
God's given us signs, he's given his prophets. He's had prophets that could split the Red Sea, split the moon in half, and
Mhm.
he's given it as the Quran, beautiful sayings, etc. So if you want to disregard that and you spend eternity well, then well, I can't. I can't. I can only say about how it is, but yeah, I understand that may, you know, be disconvenient for many people here. But you have the message of Allah. Allah is. I don't want to preach, but like, I don't be here preaching. But obviously, I'm here. I'm Muslim. I'm telling you, Allah is real. If you decide to divert now and decide to go anyway, then can you really blame anyone apart from yourself? Like I'm here. I'm telling you, Allah is real. Islam is a real. In terms of predestination, I'm at the point where I'm telling you He's real. If you decide to do what you want, then it's your choice. Oh, but you can.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm predestined to
No,
go
no,
to
no, no.
hell
What's
too.
what are you saying, mate?
I guess I'm predestined to go to hell too.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Sorry. Yeah.
Sucks to be me.
Well, you have a choice right now to
Well, it's
just say,
predestined, you know. I had a
maybe
choice, but it's predestined.
oh,
My
sorry,
choice
mate.
was predestined.
Well, yeah, but you have a choice, right? Like you're at the fork of the road right now. You
Mhm.
can decide one way or the other. You are choosing from your own free will to just choose your own way. So you are at the fork of the road. You can decide right now what you want to do. If you choose it, you have to live your consequences. I apologize if it's a bitter to pill to swallow, but you
I,
are given
I've
freedom of will.
I've heard it from many Muslims. Don't worry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do get it. I'm not preaching to the choir. It's uncomfortable, but there is a fork in the road. We all have our choices, and we have to be responsible to take them per se. I believe in God. I believe in. I believe. Sorry. Sorry. So I believe in obviously. One second. What's wrong? What's wrong?
Al, you okay?
It's okay. So I believe, yeah, we do have our choices. We do have our times where Revelation is told to us. Um, if you don't get a correct form of Islam or whatever, you probably be in hell. But again, like I said prior, it's hard to speak for Allah Subhanahu. If I say you're going to go to hell, that's me committing major blasphemy. So you know what I'm saying? Like I can't call it.
No, I get where you're coming from, and yeah, Al, if you need to go, feel free to do
Can I
so.
ask
I know.
one more point? I
Yeah,
just feel like we should close 1%. Apart Stalin, I'm not saying atheists in their nature are prone to doing terrible acts. I'm not saying you as an atheist due to a bad day will start to kill people or whatever. I'm saying Stalin and Mao and Xi Jinping don't have moral anchorage. They're doing terrible things because they feel it's right. What we feel is terrible, they feel is right due to their lack of anchorage. In Islam, if something is wrong, even if you do it, which is wrong, we don't say it's right. It's wrong. And if we say it's right, then we're not Muslim anymore. So if I say I want to do something that's prohibited in Islam and say it's right, I that the moral objectivity is gone. I'm not a Muslim anymore. Likewise, with Xi Jinping and Stalin, they do not have an anchorage to obviously they don't have an anchorage to say what is right and what's wrong. In Stalin's eyes, whatever he did was most productive and was most beneficial. So he did it. So if you want to add any thoughts, you can. But I thought I'd give my 2 pence per se.
yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I'll just repeat what I said before, that I don't think you can link it necessarily to their atheism. You can
Yeah,
link it
I'm not doing
to
that. Yeah.
a lot of other factors, and I think you can't really say anything about an atheist beyond that they're an atheist. Uh, so you could have an atheist who would be a bloodthirsty dictator, and then you could have one who could be like a peace-loving, wouldn't harm a fly person. So I think it depends on like other factors beyond this anchorage that you're talking about. But I guess we can agree to disagree on that one as
That's
well.
okay. I'm not
Yeah,
here to like condemn atheists or whatever. I'm just my conversation is more about moral anchorage and how we
I
define our
understand. Yeah.
anchors. But thank you, Second Spirit, for having me as a host.
Oh,
You've been very
thank you so
courteous.
much
You've allowed me
for.
to. You've made amendments for me. You've been very magnanimous
Thank you.
in my request. So I do appreciate that. And I thank you so much for your hospitality. But yeah, thank you so much for your talk. Hopefully, we can have some more fruitful conversations in the
Sure,
future. I
sure.
do apologize if I have ruffled some feathers in the comments, but
That's
it
totally
is what
okay.
it is.
I'm just really glad that you came on this channel, and I know it probably wasn't easy, especially because most of my viewers are
Yeah,
people who are opposed to Islam in one way or another. So I really appreciate you coming in and being so patient and thorough with
yeah,
like everything. So I
yeah.
think we
No
had a
one
really great
destroyed each other. We had a
conversation.
nice conversation, no
Yeah,
rhetoric. Yeah, it's all good.
yeah,
Take care. Allah Hafiz.
yeah. Take care, Al. All right. So for everyone still here, I have a surprise bonus interview to do with you. So I was talking to Friendly Muslim, who some of you might recognize as someone who's called in on the channel before. He's also a YouTuber. And Friendly Muslim suggested speaking to another Muslim today. And I thought, why not? Especially because Al had to leave a little bit earlier than we initially discussed. So I do have a second Muslim to just talk about for, we're not going to talk for an hour and a half like I just did with Al, but maybe we could have like a nice little conversation. So stick around for that. I'm just going to check to see if Khalil is ready to go. I know you've been waiting for a really long time, Khalil. I really appreciate that. Khalil is ready. Okay, so I'm going to add you in 3, 2, 1. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Going pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing all right. That was a really good conversation that you were having with the brother.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for watching. And like I mentioned, thank you so much for being patient. I know we had discussed, I think maybe you coming in like an hour in. So I'm glad you kind of waited a little bit longer.
Yeah, I do these streams all the time. I know people
Okay.
sometimes have to wait a while, so I
Okay.
totally get it.
Okay. I appreciate it again. So yeah, I have to be honest, I don't know much about you. So what Friendly Muslim told me was that you're a former atheist who converted to Islam. So I was wondering if you could maybe share just with everyone watching, like, the long story short version of your life story.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. So I was born into a Catholic family,
Mhm.
raised in a Catholic school, was baptized, confirmation, confession, communion, the whole works. Um, when I was in about second grade, I had a science teacher tell me that if I didn't turn my science homework in on time, that I'd be hung by my tongue over fire and brimstone. At that point, I came home and told my mom how important and imperative it was for me to finish my homework, not knowing what that the teacher had told me anything that was wrong. And she ripped me out of that school pretty quickly, put me into a public school. Started going to I guess I call Christianity more of a diluted Catholicism. So I went to a Christian church, Methodist specifically, joined the youth group, joined the church band, got heavily involved with the church. Eventually, years passed, became a youth leader of that youth group, was given the ability and permission to start giving sermons every now and then. When I did give those sermons, the people were like, "Oh my gosh, brother, you're filled with the Holy Spirit. You should go to seminary and become a pastor." So I started studying, and I said, "All right, I'm going to go to seminary. This is my calling. You know, I speak good in front of the church, so I'm going to go and become a pastor." When I did that, I studied the Bible, dove more into it to just get one step ahead, and unfortunately, through my studying of the Bible, I found quite a few issues with it. Um, and once finding those issues, kind of stepped away, became agnostic for a little bit. And then for the last 12 years, up until about a year and a half ago, I was a staunch, hard atheist, making the positive claim that it's logically impossible for there to be any gods. So through that time, I started building logical arguments against the existence of God. And I was able to dispel all kinds of different beliefs. I was in the military, so I spent some time in Kandahar, Afghanistan on my deployment. Met some Muslims out there, very, very friendly people, some of the most peaceful people I've ever met in my life. But never really dove into the religious aspect, more of the cultural aspect. So from there, I came back and I was just building these, arguments, and there was some Muslim brothers that were debating people, and that's what I did. I already had a YouTube channel as an atheist called the Empathetic Atheist Show, and I had people on to discuss what they believed and why they believe it, always being open minded to changing my position if there was something that was brought that was convincing to me. Um, so I got in with these guys, and they were just, like I said, just destroying everybody's worldviews. Atheists, they were destroying Christians, Hindus, the whole works. So I said, hey, these guys think they're pretty cool. I'm going to debunk Islam for them to show them, put them back in their lane, bring them down a few pegs. So over about a year and a half's time, I specifically debated with these Muslims and attempted to debunk and dispel Islam theologically, logically, and every single time I tried for that year and a half, I failed. Showed that with all the other logically impossible worldviews, found out that my atheistic view, that I think is the only view as an atheist you can hold to have a logical worldview, is a very specific one. I had to get rid of my atheism and go with the most reasonable position to hold logically, which would be the Islamic position. And then dove into the Quran, read the Quran, and just strengthened my belief from there. And now that's what I do today, is I argue for Islam and argue against atheism and Christianity.
Okay, wow. Well, very eloquently shared. Thank you so much.
I've done it a few times.
Yeah, I can tell. I can tell. Um, so, Khalil, what we can maybe do is kind of the same deal with Alec. If you want to ask me questions at any point, feel free to do so. But what I wanted to really learn from you is let's say two things. I mean,
Mhm.
you touched upon it briefly, but I'd love for you to expand. So two things. Why did you feel a need to turn to Islam, and what convinced you that Islam was the truth in your eyes?
Sure. Yeah. So, I'm a fallibilist when it comes to knowledge. Like I said, I was an atheist for about 12 years. So you'll see through our discussions that we have,
Yeah.
inshallah, we'll have more discussions after this. I know you said you don't want to have a long hour and a half. I do this for a living on YouTube. So I would love to, I mean, I'll have a 4-hour conversation with you if you want to.
Oh
Like,
wow.
I'm totally down. Like I do, I think my longest stream was like 16 hours to where I just invite people on to have these discussions. But yeah, so what that point that it became true was for one, when I see somebody that has a belief, I think about their belief as like a house, right? And if I think that I have a better house than they have, what I do is I respectfully and friendly, in a very friendly way, have a conversation with them, trying to tear that house down logically, bring it down to the bare bone minimum, down to that foundation, seal up all the cracks in that foundation, and then once we have a foundation, which is what I call sound epistemology, then we can start building upon that house, right? So still have a very, I guess you could say, secular atheistic type of mindset, and I don't just believe in things because I want to believe them. In fact, I was very very reluctant. Like atheism was the last, or I'm sorry, Islam was the last thing on my mind. I've spent my life as a neo-Nazi, a white supremacist before. I was in the military, fought Muslims in Afghanistan. Islam was the last thing on my mind that I thought that I was going to have my name connected
Okay.
to.
So I guess just to go back to that first question I asked, like, why did you feel a need to kind of explore Islam? What was it, one of those things where you felt like maybe it was just like your curiosity, your skeptic side of, let's look into this and see what I can find, and it's
Well,
just
yeah,
kind of
for me, it was just, let me just add another one to the pile, another God claim that just falls short logically. Let me just add another one to my list of known false gods, right?
okay.
Because I've already, I specialize in talking about the Trinity. I just had a debate with not doctor, but Reverend Samuel Green the other day. I debate reverends on the Trinitarian view, incarnation, atonement. Like, we can go through the Bible, we can do whatever you want in Christianity, and I can show how on a logical level it's not consistent and is logically impossible. And I attempted to do the same thing with Islam, like using that same exact criteria, the same perspective from a hard atheist mindset. And at the end of the day, I took my Shahada. So it wasn't like I have these fundamental beliefs and I need to have confirmation bias and all this
Mhm.
other stuff to try and justify these beliefs. In fact, the belief that I came to was contrary to my current beliefs that I held.
So to me, it kind of sounds like you just inevitably had to convert to Islam because, well, if I can't, if I
The
can't,
logical impossibility to the contrary.
the logical impossibility of the contrary. So I know this is probably something that's going to be difficult to explain simply, but what would you say, if you could kind of walk me through your thought process? What was the way that you came to conclude that it's like Islam has to be logically the correct answer?
Sure. So, and I will put this out there. I don't think there's one specific argument that proves the existence of God. I think
Okay.
that's ridiculous. I think that if we take certain arguments and daisy chain them together, we could take baby steps that get you one step closer, one step closer, one step closer, and eventually you're at the point to where you can't deny it. Like, and what I'm speaking of is deductive arguments that logically follow. So if the premises are true and agreed upon, the conclusion logically follows from those premises.
Okay. Well, can you give me a few examples? I mean, you mentioned a lot of different things, but a couple would be
Sure.
interesting to know.
So, like I said, I start off with epistemology, right? So I try and figure out where we both stand. I can see that you're big into finding common ground with even people you disagree with. That's
Yeah.
a big thing for you, and I totally agree. I think that's where we should start. I think that's why I have a really good conversations with atheists, is because a year and a half ago, I mean, I was one. So I know how the atheist thinks. I know the different positions to hold. You know, I still have a vivid sight of what's in that bag of atheistic arguments and counterclaims. So I get exactly, you know, the mindset, the way that some atheists think. So I think that I can connect with an atheist a lot more than someone who's always been a theist and just doesn't understand the concept of just believing that there's a materialistic world without some type of higher deity, you know. Excuse me. But yeah, so I mean, I would start off with epistemology. And not every atheist is the same, and theists need to understand this, is that you don't necessarily, just because you're an atheist, have to appeal to materialism. So I would just start off by saying, do you believe that we can hold rational, reasonable beliefs without empirical evidence?
I would say yes.
Perfect. And I mean, that's one step closer to us having the same sound epistemology. So, I mean, just for example, for conversation's sake and for the chat to understand, I don't have to show empirical proof that square circles don't exist. Just analytically speaking, by definition, a square has four sides and four right angles. A circle is the negation of four sides and four right angles. So just definitionally speaking, without any empiricism added, we can just rule out the idea of a squared circle, right? And that's kind of like the concepts that I use, or the criteria by which I use these three classical laws of logic: identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle. This is the primary basis for how I critique every single claim, including Islam, right? So, and I think that that's the best way to do it, because now it gets rid of the idea of special pleading. It gets rid of the idea of confirmation bias. Like, I'm going to test every single view in the exact same way.
Okay.
And once it comes up to be shown contradictory, I throw it to the side and I move on. So if we do believe that we can both have rational, reasonable beliefs without empirical evidence, that's cool. It seems like we have very, very similar epistemology. So from there, I would present what's called a stage one contingency argument. You may have heard contingency arguments in the past, but this contingency argument only argues that there is something that is fundamental and necessary to all contingent existence. So I would say, for example, I have this pen right here. This pen could be green. It could exist differently in another possible world. And there is an external explanation on how and why this exists the way that it does. Well, I think we can agree on that, correct?
An external explanation.
Like a factory, an engineer, matter, energy.
Okay, sure. All right.
Yeah. It depends on all of these things for it to exist. And because it depends on these other things, and it could exist differently in another possible world, as if it could be pink instead of blue. I mean, there's nothing logically impossible about that. So those two criteria, those 2 points, make this thing by definition contingent. So anything that either could exist differently in another possible world, or has some type of external explanation that gives an explanation for how and why it exists, it's just by definition contingent. And necessary is the exact opposite of that. It could not exist differently in another possible world, and it does not have any external explanations. So regardless of what we think is contingent and not, you just take the set of all contingent things, right? Whether you think that's the universe or the cosmos or a certain grouping of things within the universe, doesn't matter. I don't care what it is. I don't even care if you say it's an infinite regression. I will grant an infinite regression of causes and effects that have external explanations, a cause to its effect, in the, ad infinitum in the past. So with that being said, I would say if we had the set of all contingent things, this blue pen is part of that set that could have been different. And if this could have been different, thus the set could have been different, which means that the set, since it could have been different, is contingent itself. So if we're going to stay consistent with the definitions we use, if the set has an external explanation, or if the set could exist differently, it's by definition contingent. So the explanation for the set would have to be something outside of the set of all the contingent things, which would mean the explanation would have to be non-contingent, which is something that's fundamental and necessary. Now, like I said at the beginning, I'm not arguing for God right now. I'm arguing simply that there's something fundamental and necessary. Any objections to that?
So far, so good.
Okay. So we would then agree that there is something fundamental and necessary to all contingent existence. What that thing is, now we have to look at the properties. So this thing, it has to hold to these two criteria of one, not being possible that it could exist otherwise, any other way, and two, it doesn't have an external explanation. So let me just bring, for example, the Christian God claim, right? Or energy. We could say energy, for the atheist. A lot of atheists will end up saying energy or reality. And I simply just ask the question, is it logically possible that energy could have knowledge? Well, there's no logical contradiction. Obviously, physically speaking, sure, energy doesn't have knowledge. Energy is just the ability to perform work. But on a metaphysical level, and logically speaking, there's no contradiction in saying that energy could have knowledge. So if it could have knowledge and it doesn't have knowledge, that means it could exist differently. By definition, energy is contingent. We need to go and we add it to that list of all contingent things, and we go look for the real necessary thing, right? And we just keep doing that over and over and over again. Then we get to the Christian God. Christian God is one being with three persons. Well, could God exist as 5 persons or 923 persons? Like, if it's possible, then it could exist otherwise. Bam, it's contingent, right? If it couldn't exist otherwise, why is it arbitrarily limited to 3? Now there's an external explanation for why it's limited to 3. That's not so we just keep going down this route. The only way to get out of this thing being contingent is if it has all metaphysically possible attributes. And within those attributes, those metaphysically possible attributes, it is not limited in any arbitrary way. That is the only way to get out of it.
Okay.
Any problems so far?
So there's two things that kind of came to mind. There is something about, like, when you're talking about how if there's something that's contingent in a set that makes the entire set contingent, that I'm struggling to explain what it is, so I'm just going to ignore it for now.
You're going to say it's a composition fallacy?
I wouldn't know how to word it. I think you're more
The part's
educated in the
contingent,
wording
therefore
things.
the set is contingent. Is that what you think that I'm explaining?
Well, let's ignore that one,
Okay,
because I couldn't verbalize what my issue was with
Sure.
exactly. One thing that I was kind of curious to know your opinion on was, so my thinking is, how can we rule out the possibility that this thing that the things that are contingent are relying upon, still, like, this necessary thing still would exist? You know what I mean? Like, what if, like, does it need to continue to exist for these contingent things to rely on? Or
if there's a state of affairs to where this necessary thing no longer exists, that means there's a possible world to where it exists differently, which means that this thing is not necessary. It's contingent. And if it's a contingent thing, there's an external explanation on why it stopped existing.
Well, maybe stopped existing isn't the right word, but, like, maybe you could say that these contingent things are part of this necessary thing, and so they don't necessarily have to both exist.
The issue with that is that if we say that these are part of this necessary thing, then the parts of the set could be different. Therefore, the thing that it's part of could be different, which means that it wouldn't be a necessary being. The set of all contingent things cannot be part of the necessary thing. The necessary thing has to be an external explanation by definition.
Okay, well, I see what you're saying, but I still think that there needs to be something else to explain why we need to have that thing to continue to exist. I don't want to get too bogged down into this.
No, I got you. I'm just simply saying, maybe this will help out. Sure. I'm simply saying that if you come up with any idea and that idea entails it existing another possible way, or if the idea entails there being an explanation on why it is the way that it is, we automatically rule it out as contingent, just to be consistent with the definitions that we're working with.
Okay.
The only way to not have that happen is to have something that is necessary, that does not change, right? By nature, does not change, and it could not exist otherwise, and there's no explanation for it. That's the only way to escape it. Anything that you posit that would fall into those categories would just end up being contingent by definition. The only way to stop that is to, one, special plead, or to, two, present something that truly is necessary.
Okay. Well, Khalil, I have to be honest. Like, I don't want to get too bogged down in this
Sure.
kind of stuff, because it could take a long time to go through all these things. And to be honest with you as well, like when I hear this kind of stuff, like what I ended up, and I appreciate you sharing it and explaining it in such detail, and I do understand it, like, conceptually. What the thing that I get lost in is, how do we get from that to Islam specifically,
Yeah, sure.
like, or the God of Islam, or is that something that you're gonna, like,
It
lead to next?
necessarily leads to it.
Okay,
And that's why I'm saying,
well,
now with an atheist, what I do is I start at this fundamental point. I use this analogy, and it's kind of a funny analogy, but it's something I agreed with as an atheist. If you don't believe in God, right? Why are we talking about Quran? Why are we talking about the Bible? Why are we talking about the Bhagavad Gita? Right? The fundamental discussion to have is that, could there possibly be a God? If I told you that a magical unicorn broke into my house, took a poop on my couch, and then rubbed its hooves into my couch, why would we be having a discussion about why it's rubbing its crap into my couch before we've established that there's a magical unicorn? That unicorn needs to be established before we start talking about why it does what it does, or how it exists the way that it does.
Okay, I'm with you on that. Okay.
So once we get past this point, if you end up agreeing that, okay, this necessary thing does not have any external explanation, its attributes are unlimited, and it has all metaphysically possible attributes, at that point, I mean, what entails from that is there being a causal principle to all contingent existence that has omniscience, because it has knowledge, and its knowledge is not limited, omnipotence, omnipresence, a mind, a will. All of these things are metaphysically possible things, and they're unlimited for this thing to be truly necessary. And at that point, the question is, why are you still an atheist? And then from there, we can start working towards, all right, now we're at the idea where there is this necessary thing. There is this thing that we call God. Is he a deistic God? Is it a theistic God? Is he an absent father? Like, do we even suggest the idea that God could be an absent father? Or do we look at some of these worldviews that have been brought to us, and just like the scientific method, we take all the information that we currently have, and we build the most logical model based off of that information? So what I would do is I would say, let's go looking through all these different beliefs. As we start to show the contradictions in these beliefs, throw it out the window, move on to the next one.
Okay.
I mean, with this argument, we've already dispelled Hinduism, polytheism, pantheism. All of these beliefs through these two arguments that I've presented already dispels that. So we're only sticking with monotheistic beliefs on a logical level. And then we look at those beliefs. And at the end of the day, in my opinion, I challenge people, even as a baby Muslim, a year and a half, on every single one of my streams, I challenge people to bring me unresolvable contradictions, either within the Quran or the very fundamental nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I will take my kufi off and leave Islam on the stream. Same thing I said when I was an atheist, and I did it. I don't have a problem with that. I don't care. I live in America. Like, nothing's going to happen to me, right? I might lose some subscribers on YouTube, but that's how strong I am within my beliefs, is that I would love somebody to bring an unresolvable logical contradiction within my belief. I'll leave it.
So just to kind of understand where you're coming from. So
Sure.
you looked at all the major religious traditions that exist, and when you looked at Islam, which is the one that fit the properties or attributes of this necessary thing that we were talking about, yeah, you couldn't find contradictions in it that in your mind automatically meant that Islam is the one that has the correct answer.
I would say it's the most logical position for me to currently hold as a fallible human being. Now, both of us are, excuse me, both of us are prone to Cartesian scenarios. So both of us could be completely dispelled, or we could be completely fooled about what we believe, right? I'm not saying that I'm making any claims, excuse me, any claims of absolute certainty, right?
Okay.
What I'm saying is that I want to have the most reasonable position that my fallible mind can come to, using the reasoning skills that I've learned over the years. So, like I said, I thought I had it as an atheist. I was wrong, which means that I have to humble myself and say, I think I have it as a Muslim, but I could be wrong. And then I just challenge anybody to fundamentally show me where I'm wrong, and then I'll submit.
Okay. Well, that makes me want to ask this question. Do you think there's a possibility that if this necessary entity wanted to communicate with us, that it actually hasn't communicated with us through Islam and just hasn't yet, or never will? With all the properties that you describe it having, is that a possibility?
Well, I mean, that's something that we would have to agree upon first. Like, do you think that the arguments that I've presented thus far, do they logically follow? And once we're both at the same position to where, yes, we're at the position, there's got to be this necessary thing, has all these unlimited attributes, and we're both theists at that point, that would be a conversation that I would be more than willing to dive into. A lot of times, and I'm not saying you would do this, but like I said, I'm a YouTuber. I do this for a living. And a lot of times when we grant things for conversation's sake and we get further into the conversation, people tend to start retracting what they granted for conversation. And then we have to go right back to that fundamental discussion, because now, it would be pointless to grant something and then take it back further into the conversation,
I see your point. Well, I'll mention this at this juncture then, that one of my concerns with logical arguments like the ones that you've presented is, and I'm sure you've heard of this before, that things can logically hold, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're true. So that's one thing. And the other thing that kind of makes me worried about these sorts of arguments, especially when they're being used to prove that, let's say, something like Islam is true, is I would say I'm open to the possibility that the inner workings of existence might not necessarily follow the logic that we use.
Mhm.
So it's a possibility to my mind, it's a possibility that even if something logically holds, it could potentially not be true. Like that's like
Sure.
long story short.
My question would be, do you have any examples for me on something that doesn't hold to the three classical laws of logic?
So the excluded middle and the other two, I can't remember what they are right now.
Identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle. Just for the chat, identity is A equals A. So whatever it is what it is. Non-contradiction, it cannot be itself and not itself simultaneously at the same time in the same way. And it is either true or false that it is what it is. So is there anything that you could posit in existence that doesn't hold to those? I mean, I would even say including God, because
no, I wouldn't.
So then what good reason do I have to believe otherwise?
Well, this is where I'm kind of getting at, like what I kind of talked about with Al a little bit, is to my mind, when we're talking about, like, let's say something like, oh, there's a table right here. There is a table right here. You just can't see it. I find that those kinds of things, and me believing that that's a thing, doesn't require as much skepticism and scrutiny as someone coming up to me and saying that the Quran is from the creator of everything.
Sure.
Because of the same sort of logic that I might use to establish that I have a table here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I think that there's different claims require different means of showing the reasonability or rationality of justifying the belief itself. So, I mean, the
Mm.
table in front of you, I mean, you're working off presuppositions to say that there is a table in front of you.
Oh, well, my opinion is you have to work
E-
off
Exactly. You have to,
presuppositions inevitably.
reality is real. And then if you were to move your camera down and show me your table, now you have to presuppose that other minds exist to observe it together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
No,
I think we're working on presuppositions there. I don't deny that. I think that everyone should accept these presuppositions. I also think that we should accept the three classical laws of logic as axioms also. Like, how could you make an argument for something without saying that it is what it is? If you're presenting a subject in a sentence, you're already presuming identity. And if that means something, if there's some type of intentionality or meaning to the word that you're using, that
mhm,
means it is what it is, and you're not explaining an elephant instead of a book. Like if
mhm.
you're explaining a book, you don't mean elephant. So, I mean, the three classical laws of logic are axiomatic in the sense that we cannot have a rational thought or speak a sentence without even using these. So, all of these things right here are axiomatic, even for you to say there is a table in front of me.
I agree with you, but to me, it comes down to the practicalities of what we've had to accept just to exist as humans. So
Mhm.
like we've learned to use these presuppositions to accept that if I, like I mentioned earlier, like if I run into a wall, it's going to hurt, and if I
Mhm.
jump into this water, I'm going to drown, or whatever it
Mhm.
is. And to me, I find an issue with using that same sort of um, logic that you're talking about to establish these things, to establish, well, Islam is the true religion. The Quran came from this creator. The Prophet Muhammad got the message was revealed to Prophet Muhammad,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
then we get down to things like praying 5 times a day,
Sure.
or well, whatever like minor thing you want to talk about, like you shouldn't eat pork or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And to me, that's kind of problematic, because what you're talking about is like an entire life system, a view of what makes a good person and what your
Mhm.
fate in the afterlife is going to be, let
Mhm.
alone the
Mhm.
existence of an afterlife. So I'm sitting here as a practical person,
Mhm.
and I'm being told, and maybe you don't know my story, but I was Muslim until I was maybe 17, 18. I'm 33 right now, so I spent half my life approximately as a Muslim.
Mhm.
So I'm
Yeah,
being told,
I watched your video on why you're not a Muslim.
okay, great, okay, great. So
I like to watch a little bit about the person I'm going to
okay,
speak to.
that's great. I appreciate that. So what I'm saying is, I'm being told that there's this all-powerful being that I can't
Mhm.
see or
Mhm.
experience directly, um, uh, that's testing me. That there's
Sure.
this shaitan that is also messing with me. That there's an afterlife. That there's jinn. That
Mhm.
there's malaika, angels,
Yep.
and all sorts of other things that I can't
Mhm.
directly experience. And I'm being told to rely on this abstract logic as a justification for it. And to me, it's, maybe I should stop here just to let you like share your
So I will
opinion.
say that there's way more that entails justification for these beliefs, other than just is it logically possible? I mean, it's logically possible that there are green waffles having tea time on Mars every Tuesday at 5 o'clock. There's no contradiction within that. Is that true? No, there's more justification that needs to come with that. But I think we can agree at the most fundamental level, before we should even entertain a claim any further, it needs to be at least at a fundamental level logically possible. And that's what I'm at right now. We haven't, like I said, there's arguments that are daisy chained together to get you to understand why I believe what I believe.
Okay.
And this right here is just the bedrock of that stuff. This is the foundation in which you can say this is logically possible. Now let's see if this specific thing holds to these fundamental criteria, and then from
Okay.
there, you can say, although it could be possible that there's something else and Islam is false, what information do I have? What model can I build? And what's most reasonable to believe? I mean, if we're against that, I think we would be against the scientific method, because that's literally what the scientific method does: is gather data, make observations, make novel testable predictions through theories or hypotheses or whatever you want to say.
Mhm.
And it takes the current information that we have and builds a model and says, this is what's true right now. We could have technological advances that refine this. Like, for example, the age of the universe. It has changed at least 15 times. Why? Because our technology is advancing and we are refining that answer. And within Islam, like, just put this out there, I accept Big Bang cosmology. Obviously, Surah Anbiya, verse 30, the heavens and the earth were of one piece and then we parted them. Big Bang cosmology. I'm cool with that. Abiogenesis, evolution, I'm cool with that. I have no problems with that. I do make a slight change for the special creation of Adam and Eve. But other than that, I have no problem with science at all.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I mean, so just to understand where you're coming from, you want me to accept the logical possibility of this necessary thing before you can go on to explain how you have established that it is connected
I think
to
for the
Islam.
most genuine conversation to be had, I don't want to be working off of, I'll just grant this for conversation's sake. I want us to be working together at the same level
Okay.
the entire way through. I think that creates the most fruitful and genuine conversation possible. So what I do at certain points is I don't try and push people. Like, my job is not to
Mhm.
make new Muslims or to bring people back to Islam. That's not my job. I'm not in the business of making new Muslims. What I'm in the business of is providing justifications for why I believe what I do believe and testing those beliefs consistently to see if I'm wrong. So that's why I have these conversations. So at a certain point, I'm like, okay, what I would like you to do is look at this further, study into it, go online, try and find objections to my arguments, and then bring those objections. We can talk about those objections. At the end, if we just agree to disagree, then that's where we stop. But if you say, okay, this seems logical, I'm at this point, then we move to the next step. And we
Okay.
just keep chugging along until there's an objection. And we take care of that objection at the spot. Because I almost think about it like a relationship. If you have a relationship with your significant other and
Mhm.
you guys have these little things, okay, she does this one little thing that bugs me. And then this other thing happens. And we just chug right past it without addressing it and solving the problem. Eventually that's going to build up to a bigger problem, right? So I think we need to dispel all issues little by little as they go, so it doesn't build up into this what's seemingly a huge problem, right? We just get rid of all the little issues as we chug along.
Okay, but like you can kind of see where I'm coming from with what I'm saying. Like if I were to say that this thing is like logically possible, how I worry that just because something, as you mentioned, like there could be Martians, yeah, sipping, however you word it, sipping green tea on Mars, or whatever it is. Like we could go into like a lot of things that could be logically possible.
Yep.
Were you watching when I was talking to Al about
Yes.
the Quran and my I wouldn't call it a theory, but my one possibility that perhaps the Quran came from a being that was much more powerful and knowledgeable than us, and was deceitfully pretending or posing as the creator of the universe or of everything, but wasn't actually. And that's not to say that there isn't a creator based on the attributes that we already discussed. So that's why I'm kind of hesitant to just talk about the logical possibility when we haven't even discussed what Islam's connection to it is. Are you okay, by the way?
Yeah, I've been sick for like 3 weeks, brother.
Okay.
I
I've
don't
had
know
a
what's
cold
going
too.
on, man. Something's going around. All my buddies have been sick. I've gone through 3 things a day, Quill. Like, I don't know what's going on. I'm like, and I can't stand going to the doctor, bro. Like, I hate it. So and I got a pretty strong immune system. I normally don't take medicine. I just let my body work it
I
out.
guess it's getting tested right now.
Yeah, it is. I'll say I was much better than I was a week ago.
Okay, well that's good to hear.
But yeah, so I get what you're saying. And what I'm saying is that there is more justification needed, and there's more justification that can come from this, right? But until we get the confirmation that, yes, you're at a position to where you don't see a more logical model than there being this necessary thing that has these attributes, and these attributes are unlimited. Once we get to that point, we can move on and
So
provide further justification.
Okay, let's recap the attributes of this necessary thing one more time. Can you do that for me?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
This thing, to be truly necessary, has to have all metaphysically possible attributes.
Okay.
Because if it didn't have all these metaphysically possible attributes, that means that it doesn't have an attribute that it could have in another possible world. By definition of a contingent thing, if it could exist differently, it's contingent. If it doesn't have one of these and it could, that means it could exist differently. By definition, already contingent. The only way to get out of that is to say that it has all these metaphysically possible attributes. Within these attributes that it has, once we've established that it has to have all logically possible or metaphysically possible attributes, these attributes have to be unlimited. Because if they capped out somewhere, there would be an arbitrary limitation, just like God being three persons, right? Why is he limited to three, right? So if you say it's logically impossible that he could be a multiplicity of persons, well then cool, fine. But if you admit that there is a multiplicity of persons, why stop it at a certain point?
Okay. All right. So, and how would you define this thing? Like, would you call it a force, an entity,
A mind?
A mind? So,
Mind.
Okay, I might have missed that. Did we talk about it having a mind?
Can't
remember.
Within the metaphysically possible attributes, it must
Within
have
the
a mind.
Okay, can you explain that part to me again?
Sure, yeah. So, like I said, it has to have all metaphysically possible attributes. Is there a contradiction in saying that this necessary thing has a mind? There's no internal contradiction, which means it is logically possible that it could have a mind. And if it has to have all metaphysically possible attributes, then it must have a mind for it to be necessary.
Because it has all the attributes, then one thing that is possible, as we can see in our world, is that we have minds. So this thing, it's possible that it has a mind.
Which means that if this thing truly is necessary and it couldn't exist differently in another possible world, that means it has to have a mind in every possible world, or else it would exist differently and thus fall into that contingent category.
And to you, is this a part about a mind important because then this thing has a will that it is exerting through its mind?
Not even that far. I would just simply say that if it didn't have a mind, I can just throw it out and move to the next thing. Like, I don't even want to entertain it further unless it has all metaphysically possible attributes, because by definition, it would just be contingent. If I would say that this thing still is necessary, even though it doesn't have a mind, I'm using fallacious reasoning and special pleading at that point.
Okay. Well, I have a question for you, and man, I have to be honest. I just speaking for the viewers as well. Like, I kind of hate getting bogged down in this kind of stuff sometimes, but bear with me with this question. So when you think of the concept, let's say the concept everything, does everything include nothing?
Nothing is non-existence. So using the English language, it doesn't make any sense to say that nothing existed, right? Because then you're applying positive attributes to nothing, which is non-existence.
So nothing is not a possible attribute.
Correct.
Sorry, or I'll word it a different way. lack of a mind wouldn't be a possible attribute.
Yeah, because if it lacks a mind, you would have to say it's limited, right? If it's logically possible, right? Because it could have a mind. If you say that like, for example, I make the claim to Christians that God cannot enter his creation, right? And I say that it's logically impossible for God to enter his creation, for the simple fact that if God by definition is unlimited and the creation is limited, how could the unlimited be limited and also not change, right? It would seem logically impossible for this God to manifest his unlimitedness encapsulated in the flesh and vessel of a human being. Like, how can Jesus be God? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever on a logical level. So that's
Okay.
and it's just using the same exact criteria to test every claim equally across the board.
Okay. I got to be honest. I think you have me lost with the necessity of the mind uh, being like just because it's being one possible attribute.
Mhm.
Uh,
Let me put it this way. Do you agree that it's possible that this necessary thing could have a mind?
yes, sure.
Okay. If the necessary thing is contingent, that means it could exist in this world with or without a mind, in another possible world with or without a mind. If it's necessary, it couldn't exist differently by definition, which means
Mhm.
that any attribute that it could have, it must have, because if it doesn't have that possible attribute, then it would exist differently. And then we go right back to the definition. So that's why I'm saying the only way to get out of it being contingent is if we don't limit it at all.
If we don't limit it, okay. So, okay, my question to you is: of all the things that we could talk about in terms of attributes, why is the mind important to mention as one possible one?
Well, that leads into another argument that I present that, like I said, deductive arguments that logically follow. So, and this may seem a little outside of what we're talking about, but I think
Okay.
it might be a little healthy for us to try and move on to something slightly different so we don't get quite bogged down. But if I was to say that you speak Arabic, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you say Bismillah,
Mhm.
and I say in the name of Allah or in the
Yeah.
name of God, we've made two separate statements that have the same meaning. It linguistically they're different, but they
Okay.
mean the same thing. That meaning in philosophy is what's called a proposition. Proposition is the meaning that a statement describes. So the truth value is not placed on the statement itself because there's only one truth to it. And if there's two statements, you can't have two different truths. So if there's one truth, that one truth would be put onto the proposition itself, the meaning of what those statements mean, right? So then I would ask, do you think that truth itself is a physical or conceptual thing?
I would say it's a conceptual thing.
I agree with you. So if truth is a conceptual thing, are concepts mental things?
Yes.
Are mental things grounded in minds?
Hmm. That's an interesting question. I guess they would have to be.
Correct.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Now we're just going down these lines. These are premises to where there's going to be a logical conclusion that logically follows. So if let's go back to, like, for example, the law of non-contradiction or the law of identity. Let's go back to the Big Bang. Let's just
Okay.
hypothetically say the Big Bang cosmology model is the model that describes the ontological reality of the beginning, or
Mhm.
back to Planck time. That singularity was a singularity. Do you agree?
Based on my very limited understanding, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that singularity wasn't itself and also not itself simultaneously. It was what it was.
It was what it was. Well,
Correct.
it's like what we have is an observation of what it was.
With the microwave background radiation and
Yeah.
radiometric, not radiometric, but redshift.
I know what you're talking about. Like, well, uh, to your point on that, uh, like, we can't really say anything about what happened before it,
Correct.
right?
Yeah, I'm not even talking about
Yeah.
before it. I'm just simply talking about at that very moment, because I'm establishing something very important that
Yeah.
dispels materialism altogether. And I'm not necessarily saying you're a materialist of any sort or a physicalist, but at this point, we've agreed that concepts are mental things and mental things are grounded in minds. So these things, this law of identity and law of non-contradiction, these are necessary truths. Are these truths, do you believe that these truths are physical, or do you believe these truths are conceptual?
They're conceptual.
Okay. So if we've agreed that they're conceptual, that means that these concepts existed and were true at the singularity. Now, can we agree that brains didn't exist at this point?
Brains didn't exist at the point of the singularity.
Yeah.
I don't know. as far as we're aware.
As far as the
But
information that we have,
yeah,
brains did not exist yet. So let's go back to everything we've agreed upon. At the Big Bang, there was truth, which are the law of non-contradiction, law of excluded middle. These truths are conceptual. We've agreed that concepts are mental things, and we've also agreed that mental things are grounded in minds. So if we're going to say that at that very moment it was true that the singularity was a singularity, you go all the way to the end of everything we've agreed to, and mental things are grounded in minds. So there must have been a mind to ground the truth of the law of identity and non-contradiction pertaining to the singularity itself.
there had to be a mind to do that.
Logically following from what we've already agreed with. We've agreed that that these laws of logic are concepts. We've agreed that these concepts that are necessary truths existed at the singularity. We've agreed that minds or brains didn't exist at the singularity. We've agreed that these concepts are mental things, and we've agreed for there to be a mental thing, there needs to be a mind for it to be grounded in. Unless you want to make an argument that there's mental things outside of minds, to which I have no clue what that even means.
Okay, no, it does make sense to me. Okay, I'm with you on that. Okay,
that's the importance of the mind.
Okay, all right. So let's just do it. I'll grant you the logical possibility of the necessary.
I need you to say in your stream that you're a theist now.
So just to clarify, I haven't heard it worded exactly the way you have. I am familiar with these arguments before, and I'm open to them. So in that sense, and this is kind of why I didn't want to get too bogged down in the weeds of it. I'm open to them, but to me, they're almost kind of irrelevant because they're like abstract things that are reliant on logic. And I don't know how we can get from those things to the God of Islam.
Well, because like I said before, I think the God of Islam is necessarily logical. I don't think that God could be not logical. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have the ability to violate the laws of logic. Everything in existence, no matter what it is, has to be logical.
But like, I mean, aside, let's keep that aside for a moment. I really just want to know how, like, literally, like, the connection now from this necessary entity with a mind to the God of Islam.
Sure. Yeah. So if we go through all of the so just like the scientific method, we're at the point to where there is this causal principle that has these attributes, and these attributes are unlimited. We're theists at this point, right? So then we start looking at all of the beliefs that have been brought to us, at least monotheistic beliefs, because through these arguments, we've already gotten rid of polytheism and pantheism and all that. So monotheistically speaking, we use the process of elimination to dispel all other beliefs, all beliefs that have logical contradictions. Islam is left, right? I mean, let's just hypothetically say, through it all, you find contradictions in everything else except Islam. Does that mean that Islam is true? No, it doesn't. But at this point in time, would Islam be the most rational, reasonable position to hold, as in you found contradictions with everything else except Islam? Yes, it would be the most rational position to hold, other than just not having a worldview at all, right? I think everybody is prone to having a worldview necessarily.
Okay.
And then we can dive further into the Quran, what it says, try and dispel and find contradictions within the Quran. And when we can't, although I could not prove to you with absolute certainty that it's true, I could say that I'm not calling anybody an idiot. I would just say it's most logically rational for you to hold the one belief that you found, or the one position that is not contradictory.
So here's the thing, like, that I don't understand at this point, that if something doesn't have contradictions, does it necessarily mean it's true?
No.
Okay. So let's again, because I just kind of want to move this along. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that Islam doesn't have any contradictions.
Mm-hmm.
What does that prove?
It proves that if you hold another view, that you're holding a less rational view than Islam.
So by that you mean of the major religious traditions,
Of even and atheism included.
why of atheism included as well?
Well, here's the idea. Through atheism, right?
And
We've already.
let's just say for the sake of this, just I'm going to define it as just like lack of belief in a god.
I can do that for you.
Okay.
I totally
All right.
disagree with that. Even as an atheist, I argued with atheists about the definition of atheism.
Well, like, I mean, if you're thinking like to say that belief there isn't a god.
Well, if theism is the proposition that God exists, atheism then would be the negation of the proposition, not a psychological state of belief. So if I said I believe that God exists,
But
and
it
that would
wouldn't
be
necessarily
theism,
have to be positive, though, like a positive statement, right? It would just
then
be.
you'd just be a non-theist, right? If you're an atheist, that A at the beginning of the word, grammatically speaking, is a negation of whatever the proposition of the word that's being used. So
Yeah,
if
well,
theism is the proposition God exists, atheism would be God does not exist. And that's a positive claim.
well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think it has to be a positive claim if it's the negation of something else. Like if you have like a negation of a belief, that isn't necessarily saying you believe the opposite.
But do you have a positive worldview of a non-God world?
A positive view of a non-God world. Like, what do you mean by that?
So when you reference facts within your own belief system, right? Are you referencing a world with a God or a world without a God?
I would be referencing a world where I just lack a belief in one, but I don't know that
But when
there
it
is one
comes
or
to
not.
like explaining certain things, would you reference a non-God world?
Oh, okay. So do I like operate in the world believing as if there is no God?
Yeah, like when you say that the universe expanded, the universe was in a gaseous state, this naturalistic process of matter forming, heavier elements eventually created solar systems. Those solar systems had planets that became atmospheric because they're in the Goldilocks zone, things of that nature. All of this is just a naturalistic process that has nothing to do with the existence of God, correct?
I would say I don't know because I can't definitively rule it out. I just would say that I operate without that belief. I just don't
So
believe it.
you don't take a position then, right?
No.
That's how and like I said, I know what you mean by what you say, so I don't want to get bogged down in
Okay,
debating what
maybe we can
atheism
move
means.
on. We
I
can move
just
on to the
define
point
that
you
as
wanted to make.
agnosticism, right? So an agnostic is one who does not take a position. An atheist is one who says there is no God. An atheist is one who says there is a God. Because I could ask you, what would you define me as? What label would you give me if I said I lack the belief in the non-existence of God?
Well, I mean, I think it's important to make the distinction and like specifically referring to atheism because
Mhm.
I think there's an issue where people kind of equate theism
Mhm.
with atheism, as in like they're just beliefs in opposite extremes. When I think an important thing to note is that you can just like not believe in it, and in that sense you're an atheist, but it's not coming from the same place where it's built on these beliefs. It just isn't a belief. It's just a lack of it.
Sure.
Can you see why? So I guess you could kind of say that you're talking about hard. I think I've heard people call it hard atheism.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so let's
Traditionally speaking, have you ever heard of Antony Flew?
no.
I think you might be interested if you look up. He wrote a paper called "The Presumption of Atheism" in the late 70s, I believe. And basically, what he did, classically speaking, if you go to any philosophical circle, like you can even look up Dr. Graham Oppy, who's an atheist philosopher, on YouTube, and he does a skit on capturing Christianity, to where he was interviewed on atheism itself. And he says, philosophically speaking, classically speaking, atheism has always been the positive assertion of the non-existence of God, right? And he says that if you come into a philosophical circle saying atheism, I just lack belief, you'll literally be laughed out of the room because they use the classical traditional prior to Antony Flew definitions. Antony Flew wrote this paper stating, I'm redefining what atheism is because I do not want to have a burden of proof. So it was simply, I mean, just in all honesty, it was an escape from having the burden of proof. He wanted to have the belief.
I think that's an important thing, though, to note that it doesn't need a burden of proof.
Well,
I can see your point of how it can be used as an escape, but I think it's important to note that it doesn't require one.
Sure, yeah. And like I said, I know what you mean by what you say. I would just personally, I would call you an agnostic or a non-theist, because me as an atheist, when I say I was an atheist, I was saying it's logically impossible for there to be a God. Here is my positive arguments for that.
Okay, I think we just need to move on from this because
that's fine.
I think it's probably it's probably getting too bogged down. I should mention also that I have to basically leave in like 10 minutes.
Sure, that's fine.
So I'm wondering what we should do. Maybe we should just do another live stream another time.
I'd love to.
And then maybe we could kind of just start from the beginning, or kind of pick whatever you prefer. We can discuss afterwards. So, okay, how about this? So let's say we've reached the point where we've talked about how there's this necessary being with a mind, logically possible, and pick up from there.
Sure.
How does that sound?
I would say at that point it would be necessary that there has to be this being, because those two first arguments I presented, it answers the question of why is there something rather than nothing, right? I think that we can both agree that something cannot come from nothing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, and this answers that question. Is there just contingent things? If there's just contingent things, then it seems at some point we're going to have this thing that we call a brute contingency, which to me seems like special pleading, that all these contingent things have explanations except for this one contingent thing right here, right? That seems like special pleading to me. We're setting this one contingent thing to the side and saying, well, this contingent thing doesn't have an explanation. If we split the categories and say all contingent things exist here, and by definition, it has an external explanation, whatever that explanation is must not be contingent. If it was, it would just be part of the set.
Okay.
So,
all right. Okay. Well, we can pick up from there. Thank you so much for coming on.
Sure.
I appreciate your patience with explaining everything again. It's complicated stuff.
It's something that took me over a year and a half to grasp.
Oh, there you go.
I don't expect anybody to get it in a 20-minute conversation.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your patience with that experience, with your own experience. Yeah. So with that, I can let you go. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I personally apologize because it was mainly me, I would say, that was getting us bogged down, but I think it was necessary for kind of just like establishing where these things are coming from, because they're really abstract. They're really abstract, and I try to be as specific and clear as possible. So with that being said, thank you all for watching. And just to look at the poll results, so 84% say yes to the question, would you like to see more dialogues with Muslims like this one? And I think I think I'd be very happy to have Khalil on again. It looks like there are a lot of people who weren't big fans of your approach.
Normally they're not.
I will say that me personally, I found you to be coming from things from, like, I can totally see where you're coming from, and you speak in a very methodical, clear way. And again, I really appreciate that, and that's why I would love to have you on again.
And what I try and do is, from the atheist, mind, when somebody uses the word faith, when somebody uses the phrase personal experience, when somebody argues from emotion, that doesn't help you out at all. Nor did I come to my position from an emotional or personal experience.
That's clear
it
to me.
It has to be logical, brother. Like,
I understand where you're coming from. Yeah. I would say you're actually pretty unique for Muslims I've encountered in that sense. But again, we can talk about this next time. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, again. And Khalil, you can stay on. Actually, we can talk a little bit once I get off the broadcast.
Okay, sure.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you again, everyone. And I'll be back with another video soon.